Hey, Steel Watchers, it is mine and especially Eric's favorite time once more.
No! No!
Shush,
No!
shush.
No!
It is, as you can tell from the screams of torture, it is time for us to start thinking about our top 5 episode for season 3. So, as
Our
always,
top 5 episodes episode.
Yes, exactly. That's how it sounds. That's what I meant. So as always, we welcome and encourage everybody else's contributions as well, because otherwise it's just the two of us talking. And I mean, like, we do that enough. So if anyone wants to submit their top 5 episodes of season 3, please do so. You can send them to the email. That's probably the most preferable spot to send them, so we can just compile them and make a list. And yeah, we will read them. Let us know whether or not you want us to say your name when we read it or not. And
what name you want us to use. If you want to be introduced as Lord Darth Vader. Okay.
I had a student who wanted to be called Batman once, so I did. So yeah, please send us your top 5s so that we can stretch out the episode and pad it. No, I'm serious. Like, we can include it with quality content.
Yes.
That's pretty much all I had to say.
As opposed to what we normally do. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Welcome to SteeleWatching, the podcast for Remington Steele fans. I am Eric, one of your hosts, and boy, it's been a rough start today, but I think we got it.
And I am Sara, and I'm ready to throw my computer out the window. But not really.
See, told you should have bought a Mac. Anyway, Remington Steele, season 3, episode almost said episode 13, episode 17, Diced Steele. Do we have anything we want to talk about before we get into the episode?
Not related to the episode, no. But I did have some stuff about the episode.
Okay, well, we'll
order, but I'll wait for you to do the thing.
Do the thing. Yes, okay, I'll do the thing. Let's see, where are we going here? Yes. Diced Steele, first aired February 12th, 1985, written by Jeff Melvoin and directed by Don Weiss. I went with TV Guide listing. The others were interesting, but I think this one tells just enough without telling too much. After the agency loses an insurance company's front money in a scheme to recover stolen jewels, the company's investigator digs into Steele's past and tells Laura he was in on the scam. Okay,
yes.
So is this the point where you're going to...
Yes, I was going to. So this is episode 17 of the official order that got aired.
Mm-hmm.
But you'll recall we've been talking about how there is an alternate order. And again, I don't know if it's an official alternate order, if it's just something that the fans created. But in the alternate order, this episode would have been the second last episode of the season. And I think that personally makes a huge difference. And in my opinion, this works really, really well as the second last episode because it sets up the finale, right? Because we've seen the trajectory of this season as a whole has been starting with the very first, is probably the most, aside from all the issues with the order of the episodes, this is probably the most continuous or serialized season in the sense that it has a start and, you know, the events of that first episode have set off the resulting events of the rest of the season and culminate in the finale where he takes off, right? So the very first episode of season 3, we've got this fight that they have, this big fight that results in a breakup or the freeze. And then you've got the resulting episodes up until Have I Got a Steele where they're not together. Mm-hmm. They've got like little near misses with being together, but officially they're not together. Then once the quote-unquote thaw starts, you've got a bunch of episodes where he basically spends every single episode scrambling around trying to get them into some sort of romantic rendezvous, whether it's a vacation or something where they're out of their normal element, almost trying to desperately recapture that relationship that they had before. And it doesn't work. For whatever reason, those attempts fall flat, or they don't work, or stuff goes wrong, or people shoot at them, or whatever. And then this episode here, you've got the introduction of Norman Keyes, who becomes a major antagonist later on. And that kind of like doubt that he has about Steele and wanting to find out who he really is, etc., that would lead into that last episode really, really well, because that last episode is where the trust finally breaks. And again, Laura kind of suggests they go their separate way. Like, it's a really good placement in the alternate order. Not that this is poorly placed, it's still towards the end. So it still kind of hints at that, but I think it was a really good idea personally if it had been right nestled up to that finale. So yeah, that was just a thought I had on the order situation.
Okay. Well, I mean, I can see that. I think it works okay in this position, but yeah, I can see what you're saying.
It's not as bad as some of the other episodes, like Chips, where that's placed, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway. Oh, okay. So let's now that we're done talking about shuffling the cards, so to speak.
I see that. I see what you did there. That was good.
Let's get into it. First of all, the episode opens with a rendition of Laura's theme, which is the theme music used to open season 1. And of course, what we see or what we hear here is more of a late night smoke-filled jazz club feel to the song to begin with, and then it becomes a more lush orchestral version, which I really like this opening. It really works well with the overall theme of the episode, because I mean, we wind up in Las Vegas. Vegas is known for not just gambling, but the smoke-filled jazz clubs, orchestral things. It's got that whole vibe. So it's nice that we start out setting that stage.
I assume they had to have because we've got a long extended opening here of all the shots of the night sky of LA. And I assume that that's partly because there are so many guest stars in the episode that they had to they had to get all the credits in, right? So you got to have this long extended.
Well, of course, nowadays they would just jump right into the episode and just put the guest star credits underneath the scene at the bottom of the screen as they're going along. Things have really, really changed. But yes, that could very well be.
And we've got
very good.
This is another one of their quote unquote vacation episodes because it's on location in Las Vegas, and they go to the Desert Inn, Golden Nugget, Boulder City, and the Hoover Dam. Yeah. So yeah.
And in the commentary, which most of the commentary has virtually nothing to do with this episode in terms of the content of the episode, but they do say that, or Michael Gleason, I think it was, says that they basically took over the casino. So I wonder how much that cost them. I mean,
probably not cheap. I mean, and considering all the other places they've flown this season for, this must have been a very expensive season to film.
Yeah, I mean, I can just imagine the casino. Well, let's see. People come in, they normally gamble for 6 hours at a time. They usually lose about $1,000. Yeah. Okay, it's going to cost you $500,000 to cover our losses.
And the house always wins, so
Yes, that's right. Anyway, as you indicated, we see these distant edge of darkness views of Los Angeles with the opening credits. We then see a close-up of a blackjack table. There's a case of chips in the foreground. And behind the case, we see a woman's hands sweep a deck of cards out into an arc, face down. And we see from the sleeves of her clothing there above her hand, she's wearing a long white, it's not long and white, it's a white long-sleeved blouse and a vest of a red tartan pattern. She then returns her hand to the point where she started the sweep, sweeps her hands again, flipping the cards face up, then sweeps her hand yet again, but this time piling up the cards into a stack. Next, we see Steele, and we recognize that we're in his apartment as he grins somewhat patronizingly and says, a bit showy. And we see that
he's got a quote-unquote, he's hosting a poker game.
Uh-huh.
He's hired a professional card dealer.
Mm-hmm.
Most people just have, their buddies over for beer, but this, for the Sting thing, he's got theoretically a bit showy. Hello, pot, kettle.
Yeah, really. Yeah, says the guy who's over the top 3/4 of the time.
Like literally almost all the time.
So anyway, we now see that the dealer is Laura, and we can recognize this in part from her white blouse and the vest.
Yeah.
Minor technical point here.
I have a lot of questions. So after your technical point, I've got quite a few questions about this.
Isn't sweeping the cards from right to left, like we saw, more like something a right-handed person would do? And wouldn't a left-handed person tend to sweep the cards from left to right?
So you can't, for those who can't see me, I'm like testing it out with my hand, but
well, whichever way it is, it looks backwards because we know that Stephanie is left-handed. So I'm wondering if they used,
actually.
Huh?
I didn't actually know that.
Did I just stream that somewhere? I thought she was left-handed.
You could be right. I don't know. I've never really paid attention. But anybody else know?
I may be hallucinating. I could have sworn that it was an established fact that Stephanie was left-handed.
It could be. I could just be clueless.
Okay, I may have just blown my whole
It's entirely possible that I'm clueless, so I would just...
It's entirely possible that I just dreamed it and thought it was reality. I do that from time to time. I will have a dream, and I don't realize it's a dream. It actually embeds itself in my mind as a memory of an actual event. I may have just blown my whole point. But anyway, if Stephanie is left-handed, as for some reason think, I think the action of the card sweeping here is backwards and an indication that maybe Stephanie wasn't the actress used in the card handling shots. But anyway, ignore me because I could be totally
She's left-handed.
off
According to my Google search, she is left-handed. So yeah, you're right.
Woo, got one.
Google is your friend. I just never noticed it before, but I do weird things with my left hand and weird things with my right because I am right-handed. I write with my right, but if I am like holding a baseball bat or shooting pool or doing anything else that you typically would do with your dominant hand, I do it with my left, and I really don't know why. So
I just double-checked the video, and she is sweeping the correct way for a left-handed person to do it, but she's using her right hand.
Oh, interesting.
And that seemed okay. So I probably wrote my notes because who knows? Anyway, but yeah, using her right hand, that seems wrong. She's left-handed. I would have thought that a left-handed person would use their left hand. But anyway, so go ahead.
I have some questions. I have some questions about this whole setup. Okay.
Okay.
Because she takes the card out of the deck, which he identifies as the 6 of diamonds. She does it again. He gets it right. Okay. I have a lot of questions here. Is this supposed to indicate that he's counting cards?
No.
Because
that's a different thing.
Because that was one of my because counting cards, you would have to have played some cards already in order to be able to figure out what is in the deck and what isn't, right?
Yeah, when you're counting cards, basically what you're trying to do is remember which cards have been played.
Right, exactly.
So that you can mentally say, okay, I know that they can't get this hand because that card's already been played over here and discarded.
So does this mean he's memorized the entire deck?
No, he's got a marked deck.
Oh, okay.
See, a marked deck, and I did a little research on this for this episode. I didn't make any notes about it because it's so visual that it just didn't make any sense to try and do that. But basically, the short version is that you can buy what are you can buy what are called marked decks, and many of them actually replicate the back design of popular brands, like Bicycle is a popular brand of playing cards. what these decks do is they replicate that pattern, but in that pattern, they put an indication as to what the card is.
Oh,
And
okay.
it's one of those things that I don't want to say it's subtle, because according to everything I read, it's fairly distinctive if you know that it's there and know what to look for. It's
Right.
one of those, once you see it, you can't unsee it things, as how it's described.
Gotcha.
But if you don't know it's there, your eye would just completely ignore it.
So I had assumed that he had memorized, if it wasn't counting cards, I assumed he'd memorized it, because I have a friend who is actually in the Guinness Book of World Records for memorizing 59 decks of cards. It was over 3,000 cards. He basically went in, had all the decks spread out on a table, and he looked at them once in succession, every single deck. And then he was able to repeat back every single card.
This was after they had been shuffled and such, so they were not in factory order.
Well, yeah, they were shuffled, yes.
Right.
And then he basically had a chance to look at each one, memorize it, right? And then repeated back every single card. So that's why my mind immediately went to, oh, he's memorized the deck, because I know a person who can do that with many of them. But
well,
yeah,
there are some people out there who would say that the ability to do what your friend did means that they're psychotic. I mean, psychic.
Well, you know what?
Psychotic may fit.
I'm not gonna say much, but you're not wrong. But
yeah, no. What I'm sure what we're seeing here is intended to demonstrate that the cards are marked, and so he's just reading the markings on the back of the cards.
Yeah, that was the part that I was confused by, because I was wondering, okay, it can't be counting cards, because you can't count cards if you haven't played them yet. And
right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So we see Laura start dealing out the cards, and as you said, Steele starts identifying them one by one. Man, what a day I'm having. Started out rough, and it just seems to be getting no better. Yeah. So, 6 of diamonds, jack of spades. And then, of course, as they're doing this, Mildred comes up to the table dressed as a maid, placing a bowl of...
Poor Mildred. Why can't Mildred be the dealer? She's always the maid. Have you noticed this? She's always serving food and drinks. Well, I get it. If they try to do that with Laura would get ticked off. But
yeah. Plus, I mean, let's face it, when you're running a scam and it involves cards, the dealer is a ideal person to be in on the scam, and you probably want somebody who's going to be maybe a little bit of a distraction.
Fair enough.
Anyway, so after Mildred shows up, Laura has flipped over one of the cards, and Steele reads it and says, "Reminds me of you, Queen of Hearts." And Mildred examines the cards, because she doesn't know that they're marked, apparently, because she says she still can't figure out how he does it. And as the buzzer sounds and Steele heads toward the door, he calls back at her, "Well, that's the idea."
That's the point.
If you're going to scam somebody, you don't want them to know the scam. So, Steele opens the door to a youngish man who strides into the apartment carrying a briefcase, greets Laura and Remington in an impersonal, businesslike manner. As the man sets his briefcase on the table, Steele points to Mildred, introduces her, telling their guest that she is their assistant. Nice that she's been upgraded from secretary receptionist to assistant. So to Mildred, Steele introduces their guest as Everett Blaisdell, Vigilance Insurance. Blaisdell opens a briefcase to reveal that it is loaded with bundles of money, and we have a technical issue.
Oh, we've got a lot of issues.
Well, hey, don't get personal.
Well, yeah. You go first, and then you show me yours, and I'll show you mine.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I get that the prop department probably wanted it to make the contents of the case look interesting. But the bands that they used around the stacks of bills, totally messed up. Well, okay. The bands aren't messed up. The money inside the bands is messed up. because we see currency bands that are yellow, violet, brown, and mustard with bundle values printed on them, $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000, respectively. Except that within the bundles, all of the bills shown are $100 bills, which doesn't work.
Okay.
A yellow bundle. Oh, did you have something to add?
No, well,
Okay.
I'll add it when you're done. You go ahead.
Okay,
and finish.
okay. A yellow bundle would be $1,000 of $110 bills. A violet bundle of $2,000 would be $120 bills. A brown bundle of $5,000 would be a bundle of $150 bills. And a mustard bundle of $10,000 would be $100 bills. This is the only bundle that we see that's correct. So my question is, what is Everett Blaisdell really up to? Did he sign out the money based on what the bands added up to, but substituted larger denominations of bills, thus allowing him to take more money out than he signed for, giving him a chance after the scheme is over to return the amount of money that he signed for, allowing him to pocket the extra that he removed?
I don't know, but
I want an answer right now.
I will point out. I was going to point out that I didn't notice any of that, and you know why? You know why I didn't notice any of that? That they're all $100, that they're all the same bill? Because your money all looks the same to me. As a Canadian, no, I'm serious. As a Canadian,
well, you can't read the numbers on it. 100.
It's all the same color. We don't look at the numbers. Are you kidding me? That's why our money's color coded. If I pull out a green bill, I know I've got a 20. If I pull out a purple one, it's a 10. To me, whenever I see the money on TV, I'm just like, it's all green. I'm terrible at figuring out the denominations on TV. So I did not notice that at all.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know that he was trying to skim money off the top, because he seems pretty straight laced.
Perfect for a con man.
This made him. I think the prop department just made a mistake. But my question is, every single encounter I've ever had with an insurance company has been marked by the singular concept of insurance companies not wanting to part with money. So are they in the habit of just handing over briefcases of $150,000 in order to potentially scam a suspect into getting back? Like, this seems like a really unusual thing for an insurance company to agree to.
I won't disagree with you.
Okay.
Not at all.
All right.
And usually an insurance company is going to write a check, because that gives them some chain of evidence. So what I would have thought, I think the whole idea of a scam to get the jewels back is something an insurance company probably wouldn't do in the first place either. But if they did, they would have probably written the agency a check, annotated what it was for. The agency would have deposited the check, then gotten the money out themselves, because now this creates the chain of evidence from the insurance company to the agency. And now, he just
shows up with a briefcase full of money, and he's like, here, have some money. Like, I'm sorry, I've dealt with insurance companies. They don't do that. They don't show up with briefcases full of money going, we potentially have to pay out on these jewels, but here, have more money. That doesn't happen. Just not gonna. But maybe it's not real. Maybe it's just monopoly money. Because, like I said, your money all looks the same. Who would notice?
Well, but even monopoly money's different colors.
That's true. It's easy to figure out which bill's which in monopoly money.
Well, anyway, Blaisdell asks Steele if he wants to count the money, but Steele defers, assuring the man that their relationship is built on trust. Well, not so much.
Not Mildred.
Laura grabs the briefcase and slides it across toward Mildred, indicating that she wants their financial expert to count it, despite what Steele says. Laura glances at Steele with a subtly superior look that says, not entirely on trust. And, of course, Steele reacts with some chagrin at being countermanded by a supposed subordinate in front of a client. Because, this is an affront to both his and Blaisdell's integrities essentially
Yeah.
being told. Now, we really don't trust him. Just doesn't matter what you say, Mr. Steele.
I'm wondering
You're
if
just
it's
the
just
boss.
I'm wondering if it's just because he can't count as fast as Mildred. Like, maybe he would have to sit there and be like, uh-huh, uh-huh. And how does Mildred, like, okay, I'm guessing she does it by the bands, but if you said, if what you said is true, then it's going to be.
Well, yeah, I mean, she would probably just sit there and count the totals based on the total value of the bundles.
Right. Yeah.
Assuming.
Well, maybe he's bad at math.
Yeah, Jeff, we need to have a talk.
Mildred's the financial whiz, so, you know.
Yeah. Anyway, as Steele is acknowledging the ugly head of bureaucracy, Mildred has finished counting the money and announces $150,000. Blaisdell tries to hand a document to Steele, but Steele, apparently still smarting from the earlier put down, coupled with the fact that he really isn't in charge of anything within the agency, indicates to hand the page to Laura. Laura signs.
This is another question that I had, because obviously we know that he can't sign this because he's not actually in charge. But how would it look to Blaisdell to have, like, wouldn't the head of the agency have to sign it? How does it look to the client that the head of the agency won't sign it? Like,
I mean, people within organizations have the authority to sign for certain things.
Okay.
Without being the bosses. I worked for a car dealer, and the guy I worked with, he was responsible for the reconditioning of all the used cars that came in. He would sign for stuff all the time. That was his job. He was authorized to sign for certain things. There were other things he wasn't authorized to sign for, and he would have to get somebody signed. But yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, Laura signs the paper, hands it back to Blaisdell, and he heads toward the front door, telling everybody, "Good luck to all of us." Steele, walking him to the door, tells him not to worry. Murdoch's jewels are as good as in his hands. Blaisdell is still concerned, but Steele cuts him off, telling him, "Everett, please, you're talking to Remington Steele, okay?" And this seems to be the reassurance that Blaisdell needs. As he opens the door to let Blaisdell out, we see three men there waiting to come in. The trio and Blaisdell try to pass through the door simultaneously, and Benny, the first of the trio, a short, portly man with balding on the top of his head, is offended. "Hey, watch it, Bruce. I just had this suit cleaned." Okay, yeah, he's a little obnoxious. Anyway, as Blaisdell makes his departure, Steele welcomes in the trio, who, described in the script, are Benny, Sid, and Nathan, who look and sound as though they just stepped out of a Damon Runyon story, a trio you'd likely to spot at a racetrack, boxing contest, or similar sporting divertissement, French word, divertissement, whatever, of dubious integrity. I looked it up, how to pronounce it. I listened to the pronunciation just before we started this, and I've forgotten it already.
And welcome to every French class ever in Canadian schools.
Anyway, so Sid, the second man, who's tallish, thinning, gray hair, and wearing a brown suit, asks who the mark is. Well, it's a fellow named Eddie Grogan. Steele got a tip that Grogan stole the jewels from Murdoch, and now these three gentlemen are there to help Steele get them back.
I'm curious as to how Steele knows these three. Like, we always get these characters introduced that Steele knows from, shadier parts of the city and whatnot. We never get any backstory as to how and when he meets them. And it's a shame, because half the time they're either characters that you're thinking, how does he know that guy? Or they're characters where you're like, oh, I like this person, I want them to come back. We don't ever get the story, The
reason we don't get the story is because Michael Gleason and the staff knew that they had to leave a door open for fan fiction writers.
Yeah. Literally for the fan fiction. Okay, I got it. Yeah. So it's our duty then. Like,
that's
it's
right.
Our sacred duty.
It's an obligation. Okay. All right. If you're listening to this and you have ever written fan fiction, you must write this story.
Yep. Now you've got homework.
Yes. Well, Nathan, the third man, who's tallish, stocky, and with a head of somewhat unruly black and gray hair, says, "Sounds like a sweet hustle, Harry." So we have yet, in reference to your comment, at least one other miscreant from presumably Steele's past who knows him as Harry. Steele waves his hand and says, no, for the purposes of this caper, he is Reggie Whitewood, a desolate member of the ruling class. And I almost expect to hear Laura's nasally, sarcastic gum popping.
Reggie!
Your Grace.
Your Grace.
Steele instructs each of the men to stake themselves $25,000 and take $1,000 off the top for their services. After Benny asks about Laura and Mildred, Mildred asks if the men are interested in a sandwich and a beer. Try that again. Mildred asks the men if they are interested in sandwiches and beer. Sid tells her that if she's selling, he's buying. Benny asks Laura what she's selling, and she tells him in a saccharine voice,
Yeah.
nothing you can afford, big fella.
Oh, oof.
Laura puts the briefcase on the floor, stands and walks out of the room to join Mildred in the kitchen. And the three men look after her as she leaves for an appreciative moment, and then in Steele's direction as they sit at the table. In the kitchen, Mildred asks Laura where Steele got the shills. Laura suggests to Mildred that she really doesn't want to know. When Mildred asks why they don't just grab Grogan and choke him until he coughs up the jewels.
She's
please,
very
Mildred.
violent. There's a lot of violence here. Like why not just beat it out of him, you know?
That's right. Well, Laura is given a chance to bring the audience up to speed with a little exposition. There's no proof that he stole the jewels in question. The idea is for Steele to wipe out Grogan at the table to the point where he is forced to retrieve the jewels to pay off, giving Laura and Remington the jewels and the evidence that they need to convict Grogan, and the words most near and dear to Mr. Steele, having a finder's fee.
This is what kills me. The insurance company, they don't even have proof that he stole them, and they're willing to give them $150,000 because they suspect he stole them. I mean, we know he did, but still, like, insurance companies don't like to give money away, period.
Blaisdell strikes me as a
idiot.
I wasn't going to use that term, but I'll say kind of easily manipulated person.
Yeah.
You know, he
not the sharpest tool in the shed.
Yeah, he's definitely a passive type personality that can be led wherever somebody wants to lead him if they do it correctly. And I think Steele probably just led him there.
Yeah.
And I think later on we find out that this is his first big case. So, you know, there's
not
always
good.
that.
That's not good for his career.
No,
At
but
all.
you know, he's apparently enough of a gambler that he's going to take.
Yeah,
a
that's
chance.
true.
Anyway, so when Mildred asks how they know Grogan will bet more than he will have on hand, Laura says that Grogan is a compulsive gambler. I'd like to point out two things here. First of all, not only did Laura not answer the question, I think there's a questionable assumption behind her statement. I mean, I don't think that just because somebody's a compulsive gambler necessarily means that they're going to bet more than they have on hand. And second, it's also fair to assume that Grogan would have more cash available to him than he might have with him on hand. So, I mean, so even if he does bet more than what he has on hand, he can probably just, get the cash from other sources.
Yeah, they're taking a lot on assumption with this entire scenario on pretty much nothing to go on with except that they think he has the jewels.
Yeah.
The rest of it is all just, well, we think he'll do this. We think he'll do this. We think he'll do. So give us $150,000.
Yeah. And it's like one of those, I don't know. It's like, it's one of those puzzles where all it's going to take is one piece pulled out and the whole thing collapses. So yeah, it's,
you mean like a house of cards? Yeah, house of cards.
I was trying to avoid
cards.
Going there. I thought about that, but I was
Oh.
trying to avoid going there.
Oh,
Anyway,
I thought I was being clever. Okay.
Okay. Well, I mean, you were, but just a little obvious. Anyway, Mildred apparently accepts Laura's response as being an actual answer and says, sometimes the boss's plans strike me as poetry. And Laura cocks her head in thought, considering the concept, and then says, well, it ain't Keats, but it ain't bad. Well, next we hear the sound of the front door buzzer, and we see Steele at the door of his apartment, admitting Eddie Grogan, who is clearly very eager for the game. Next, we see Laura playing the role of the dealer, Grogan, Steele, and the three shills sitting around the table as a montage of the evening's gambling begins.
I love a good montage.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, the 80s was the decade of 80s montages. I like a good montage.
Yeah. Well, one by one, the shills get wiped out until it's just Grogan, Laura, and Steele sitting at the table. Grogan suggests to Steele that they make the game interesting. Yeah, let's dispense with the ceiling, just no limits, and Steele goes for it. Laura deals, and we see that Grogan has 2 aces and a jack showing, plus his hole card. Steele has 3 kings and a 7 showing, plus his hole card. It's Grogan's bet. Grogan makes an appreciative comment about Laura, asking where Steele got her, though it's not really clear if he's complimenting her dealing ability or her visual appeal.
I'm assuming a bit of both, frankly.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe more the latter. Steele comments that she came with the table.
I know it's rude, but that one's funny. I mean, Laura doesn't think so.
Yeah, exactly. So. I was going to say he gives Laura a dirty look, and she gives him a look that at first does seem a little sly, but then it's almost a little bit snarky.
Yeah.
Grogan pulls up the corner of his hole card. We see that it's a 4 of clubs. After a moment, he decides to go all in. He's betting everything he has, $30,000. Steele follows suit. He goes in to the tune of $50,000, all in. Well, Grogan can't match the bet because he's already all in, so he tells Steele that he's got to go light. Steele acts disappointed, saying that if Grogan can't afford the game, Grogan cuts him off, stating, well, he's got some very interesting collateral that's worth a lot more than the $50,000 bet. Steele doesn't bite, telling Grogan that he has a rule, cash only on the table. He glances over at Laura, who's mouthing something to him. The exact words seem to be indistinguishable, but the meaning is clear. Take the bet.
Yeah, and I actually think Laura's wrong here because I'm going to say that he has spent more time on these scams in the past, than Laura has. And what he's doing here is establishing his credibility. If he jumped too easily at it, if he was like, oh, yeah, sure, yeah, I'll trust you, Eddie's going to see something's off. Nobody would just readily trust someone that doesn't have the money and claims they can get it from somewhere. He has to play hard to get, so to speak.
Yeah.
Whereas Laura, who probably hasn't, she's done some stings with Steele in the past, but hasn't done a lot of this kind of thing. She just wants him to be like, yes, go, take it. But he's playing this right. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah. Well, Grogan pushes, saying that, hey, they're both men of honor, and if he loses, he'll take Steele straight to it. And he guarantees that Steele will not be disappointed. Well, Steele agrees, and with Steele's acceptance, Grogan calls. Steele flips over his hole card. It's the 4th king. Grogan can't believe it. He thought he might have had a full house, but not 4 kings. Steele begins to gloat, saying that there's time to reap and a time to sow, and that this is his time to reap. But as he begins to reap the chips from the center of the table, Grogan clamps his hands down on Steele's arm, stopping him. Steele looks up, blank look on his face, as Grogan tells Steele that this isn't his time to reap. Grogan turns over his hole card, but instead of the 4 of clubs that we saw earlier, it's the 4th ace. Steele and Laura stare in disbelief.
Yeah.
And Grogan begins giggling like a kid who just won the grand prize at the toy store.
And this has got to be the worst for Steele and Laura, because you can't go, hey, you cheated. Because how do they know that? Well, we know that because we cheated.
And that's exactly where we go with this. After Grogan sweeps up all his collection and makes comment about where he's going to put it, and Steele suggesting that Grogan take the case since he's taken everything else.
Yeah, he doesn't really sense the sarcasm. He's like, "Oh, thanks." He's just put the money in.
Really. I was going to say this later. Well, I'll save part of it for later. But yeah, Grogan is one of those characters who you're opinion of him changes a little bit from time to time as we go through the episode.
Yeah. He's a bad con artist. He's not good at it.
Well, and not only that, but as we see later on, hello, why is my watch making noises at me?
Oh, I hear it.
That was the wrong button to push. I do that. I'll look at one button and push something else. Anyway, it's not just that he's a bad con artist, but that he's also, in some ways, he's not, I don't know how to describe it.
I know it's hard to describe it. You don't want to see he's a nice guy, but like he's a
kind of airheaded in some ways. He's kind of a ditz, a boob, a dork.
He's a bumbler. Like he sort of bumbles
he's all
through
of these things.
He's smart enough to palm the card and switch them, but not smart enough to recognize that when Steele says, "Why don't you take the case?" that he's being sarcastic.
Yeah, and later on, jumping ahead here, when he's in Las Vegas and he tells Steele that he lost the entire $150,000, his attitude is, easy come, easy go.
Like the guy that you took the money from, to be clueless enough to think that guy's just going to be like, "Oh yeah, it's cool that you lost all my money." Like,
well, it's almost like he's maybe a personality disorder of some sort, but. Anyway, so where were we? Yes, he loads the briefcase, takes off, and of course Laura is not happy at all.
No, she's
is
mad.
Just giving Steele the business. And I got to say that she is being a little unfair because she presumably agreed to the scheme. It's her agency. She has to give approval to all this stuff.
Absolutely.
Not only that, but she participated. So,
and she'd have to know that this is this is one of those things that could have been gone wrong 100 different ways. Yeah. So to get mad once it goes wrong is a bit hypocritical.
Yeah, she had her chance to shoot it down before all of this happened. She didn't have to agree with it. She didn't have to participate. She could have handled it a different way, but she signed on to it. So. She shares as much of the blame as Steele does, and it's a bit unfair of her to just take it out on him. Anyway, Steele, he's understandably not taking kind to her accusations of blame. He begins to jump up and defend himself by pointing out that Grogan cheated, that Steele had seen his whole card and it was a 4 of clubs. And Laura responds that, well, he must have palmed the ace. And Mildred asks why Steele didn't stop Grogan, and as you pointed out...
Can't do
Steele points out to Mildred that if we'd accused him of cheating, he would have known we were cheating, because how would we have known he was cheating if we weren't cheating?
It's one of those, like, he's Grogan, and you got to wonder if Grogan knew, because, well, I mean, he probably would have cheated regardless, but
So anyway, Laura concludes by saying that they would then have lost all chance of recovering the jewels. She then instructs Mildred to take the rabbit and follow Grogan. As Mildred rushes out, Steele wants to know why Mildred. And Laura says that, well, we have to figure out how you're going to tell the insurance company that your so-called foolproof scheme cost the insurance company $150,000.
Yeah, that's not going to be fun. And I mean, he has to do it because he's the head of the agency, as far as they know. So, there's almost, I almost got to think that Laura's, she is just damp over the situation, but at the same time, she is probably quite happy to be able to see him squirm. Yeah, she doesn't mind putting his head on the block, at least for this particular instance, because it means
she's going to take some pleasure in it, I think.
Yeah, precisely.
Anyway, we have a quick cut to Steele's office. Blaisdell is beside himself. He can't believe that Steele lost $150,000. No, they try to assure him, desperately try to assure him. They didn't lose it. They invested it.
Okay. Invested. That's what we're calling it, is it?
Because after all, Grogan was wary. So we let him win to gain his confidence. And now we have Grogan right where we want him. And within a matter of hours, we're going to know exactly where Grogan stashed the jewels. Well, Blaisdell is uncertain. I mean, makes sense he would be uncertain because this wasn't the plan.
No, and I mean, if he believes that, I've got some swampland in Florida to sell him. Like,
and I've got a bridge in San Francisco to sell him. But they continue to pour it on thick, telling Blaisdell that everything is falling into place. He's backed a winning plan, and they can hear the accolades now. Everett Blaisdell, Senior Vice President.
If he blows any more smoke up this guy's butt, he's going to be out the door, flying through the streets. Like,
he better start buying his cigars by the
yeah, exactly.
Anyway, as they have been talking with Blaisdell, they've been slowly moving him toward the door of the office. By the time they get there and get the door open, Blaisdell's concerns have been wiped out, replaced by fantasies.
He's thrilled to have lost this money.
Yes, he's bought the fantasy. He is a conquering hero. Yes. Anyway, once they get him out of the office, they all take a deep sigh of relief. They take a deep breath of sigh of relief. They take a sigh. Yeah, what I'm saying.
Well, they take a deep sigh of relief.
Yes, that's it. That's exactly what I said. Stop copying me. And anyway, the phone begins to ring. Laura answers. It's Mildred. She's followed Grogan to Las Vegas, and he's at the tables gambling.
Of course,
Laura tries to question Mildred, but Mildred keeps interrupting, saying she's got to go. Well, Laura's concerned that Grogan has spotted her. Mildred insists that he hasn't. He's only stopped once for gas, and that she never got out of the car because she really didn't want to lose him, but she's really got to go.
She's got to go.
And Laura finally understands. Oh, you got to go.
Yeah.
And tells her to call back. Mildred does have one final thing that she can hold it for long enough.
Yeah.
She says she wants to use the company credit card to buy some clothes because, of course, she's still wearing the maid's outfit from the night before it. Everyone keeps asking her for drinks.
Okay. Do they not remember what happened in Cannes, though? Like, do they not recall that it is not
Apparently
a good idea
not.
to give Mildred carte blanche to their finances when she's in a casino?
Apparently not.
Like, that's a bold move considering what happened before, but okay. Like,
yeah. We'll go with it. We'll go with it.
Yeah.
Anyway, Laura tells her to go ahead and hangs up the phone and then tells Steele that Grogan is in Las Vegas. Steele considers that for a moment and then tells her to look on the bright side. At least he didn't go to Bakersfield.
I mean, not being a local or having, I mean, I've heard of Bakersfield, but what's so bad about Bakersfield? Somebody tell me why that's a.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure why either. I mean, Bakersfield gave us Buck Owens and that whole genre of country music there, the Bakersfield sound. So, you know, at least they did something right.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been there, so I don't know. It might be an in joke that I'm not in on because I've been to LA, but not Bakersfield. So I don't know.
Yeah,
So if anybody knows why that would be funny, please let me know. I'm Canadian.
Yeah,
that's my excuse. I don't know. I'm Canadian,
and I'm clueless. So yeah. Anyway, next we are inside the offices of Louis Capstone, president of Vigilance Insurance. Capstone is sitting behind his desk. Blaisdell's pacing back and forth and regurgitating the story that Steele and Laura gave him. We hear a caustic laugh and then see the man who, after Tony Rosselli, is the most hated, reviled, and evil man to ever grace the show. Norman Keyes.
I gotta say, James Tolkien, who plays Norman Keyes, has made a career out of playing these characters, these exact types of characters. He's in Back to the Future. He's in the He-Man Masters of the Universe movie. I think he plays a principal in that as well. I actually got a chance to meet him when he was at one of the conventions. I have him. He signed one of my Back to the Future posters, and he wrote his name, and then he wrote "You're a slacker," which I loved because you're a slacker, McFly. But yeah, like he made this career out of playing these really odious, awful little men that you just hate. And he's just so good at it. Like, that's the thing about James Tolkien is you hate Norman Keyes. You really do. But he's just so good at being hated. Like, he's just so good at being awful. So kudos to James Tolkien for just being horrible.
Anyway, Capstone asks Keyes if something amuses him. Sitting in a heavily padded chair, Keyes says he wonders how Capstone is going to list the loss of $150,000 on the stockholders report. Blaisdell angrily insists that he just got done saying that the money isn't lost. It's just shifted locations.
I wonder if that works on my bill payments. Like the money's not, it's just shifted location. It's not, I didn't pay you because the money is shifted location. It's just not in your location. It's in my location. It's going to stay in my location. I don't think that works as an excuse.
No. But hey, when you are a sucker, you'd buy it. Anyway, Keyes stands to confront Blaisdell, and he insists that the whole thing stinks, that Blaisdell is a sucker for falling for a story from some guy who just pops up out of nowhere with a cock and bull story about a grifter named Eddie Grogan being the mastermind behind a $2.5 million jewelry heist. Blaisdell insists that Remington Steele didn't just pop up out of nowhere, and that his reputation is impeccable. Okay, yeah. I mean, it depends on how you view it, but kind of he did. Anyway, Keyes isn't buying it, thinks Blaisdell is being naive, and says, at rock bottom, every human being is a greedy, larcenous louse. I just haven't figured Steele's angle yet.
You gotta wonder why he doesn't have a girlfriend. He seems so charming. Everyone's a greedy, larcenous louse.
Well, does Keyes realize that he's just included himself in that assessment of human beings? Or does he figure that he's the only... Does he figure that it's only every other human being?
Yeah.
Because somehow he is superior to everyone else and immune to corruption.
He's the bastion of purity, and everybody else is, not. That's
and
how
integrity,
he sees it,
yep.
For sure, yeah.
That's got to be...
100%. And I'm being serious. Like, that's how he would see things. Some people like him are... And I'll get into some of my observations about him in a second, but, like, people like him are very, very much... They're always the hero in their own story. Everybody else is the villain, and they're always the good guy. It's a very narcissistic way of viewing things. So, yeah.
Anyway, Capstone asks Keyes if he's saying that Steele was involved. And Keyes says that from the beginning that the entire thing smells of an inside job, which was the angle that he was working on when Steele waltzed in with his dazzling smile and his $400 suit and convinces Mr. Harvard MBA, as he calls Blaisdell, that he has all the right answers.
Okay, so here's where I want to kind of inject some. First of all, his dazzling smile and $400 suit. I think Keyes has a crush. Second of all, I don't know. Like, the dazzling smile part wasn't necessary, but hey. The second part is the observation that I was talking about, in the sense that Keyes clearly doesn't have. He says later on he didn't go to college, right? Which kind of makes you wonder how he got into that position, because you'd assume that it would be a position that would require some kind of post-secondary degree. But I mean, in those days, you could start working somewhere and work your way up without that kind of accreditation. So maybe not. But he clearly indicates a disdain for those who have attended post-secondary, right? Mr. Harvard MBA, and he's very sort of condescending about it. And this is what I mean by this kind of person that Keyes is. He's the kind of guy who didn't go to school and has a chip on his shoulder over it, right? Like, he feels that these people that did go to school are somehow looking down on him, or they're elitists, and he's, there's an insecurity there that he is filling with that bravado, that arrogance, that you know nothing because you're in a $400 suit and you have. And the hilarious thing is that he's assuming that same element onto Steele, who also has no post-secondary education and no real credentials to speak of, in the sense that we don't even know how much school Mr. Steele did finish. Like, he was homeless, so theoretically he probably doesn't even have a high school education. right? So it's
Mhm.
just funny that opinion that he has is sort of based off of these assumptions he's made about everybody who has a degree, or everybody who went to Harvard, or everybody who did this and that. And essentially, it's just covering up for a very insecure, sad little man, which is what Norman Keyes is, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a take on it, which I will present now, because
Okay.
Blaisdell, of course, is offended by Keyes's attitude and insists that there's no reason to bring personalities into the matter because, he's thinking Keyes is attacking him, which of course he is.
Yeah, he is.
But
For sure.
the ironic thing is that Blaisdell is right for the wrong reason. And this kind of touches on what you were saying. Because yes, it is a personality thing. But I think he believes it's directed at him personally,
Yeah.
as in Mr. Harvard MBA, because Keyes doesn't like him. But I think, as you said, it's about the type in general, because Keyes does tell Blaisdell not to take it personally. And then, as you said, he goes on to say that in this business, the biggest obstacle to knowledge is formal education. And that even though he
Okay.
doesn't dress like a fashion plate and admits that he never went to college, as you said, but that he knows his job. And not only that, he is good at his job. And so I think what Keyes says about the biggest obstacle to knowledge is a formal education is almost correct. I mean, almost what he means to say, although he chooses the
Yeah.
wrong word. I once coined a phrase, or at least I'll take credit for it, that goes, knowledge is not wisdom. And I think that's really what Keyes is trying to say here,
Yes.
is that just because someone has education and knowledge doesn't mean they understand how to apply it, or that the misapplication of that knowledge can lead them down a road to fallacy. And it's like creating an argument to prove, as the old saying goes, that one can pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Because an educated person could actually construct a seemingly logical argument about how that's actually possible, and then look down with disdain on the uneducated person who has the wisdom to understand that the idea is nonsense.
Yeah, and I think that it's one of those things where I think Keyes is the one who is putting that perception on himself about having not gone to college. He's clearly in this job because he is capable of doing it. As much as a horrible person as he seems to be,
Sure.
he didn't get there for no reason. He got there because he was good at the job, as he said. So, but he's seeing all these people that are being hired with Harvard degrees or whatever else, and that's making him feel insecure about it. And so therefore he's attacking anybody who has this degree, as you said, as being somebody who doesn't know anything about what they're doing. And there's no, I mean, you can get people that are bad at their job in any context. There's that old saying that somebody had to finish last in medical school, and it could be your doctor, right? Like there's no guarantee that the person that's good at their job, having gone to school doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be great at something, and not having gone to school doesn't necessarily. It depends on obviously what the profession is. You want someone as a brain surgeon, you want them to have gone to medical school, but like my husband, for example, his particular job that he's in, he is looking at his boss might be retiring, and they want him to potentially take over, but like he would need a certain educational qualification that he doesn't actually have, and they're looking into at the moment whether or not his credentials from Britain will transfer over to Canadian credentials, and whether he'd have to take courses or whatever. But like in the past, you could have, with the experience that you have, worked your way into a position, and it would have been fine. Like he has done this job, he knows how to do his job. But now we've put up so many barriers that if he can't get those credentials recognized, he won't be able to do it. They'll have to hire outside the company. So there are, certain professions, certain jobs where you can learn on the go, and that's fine. Like there's no barrier to Keyes being where he is without a college degree. He's clearly there because he worked his way there. But he's bitter and he's angry because he sees these people as looking down on him.
Yeah.
Which is,
And, the funny thing is that Keyes falls into the same trap as what he sees the other people doing, because he's looking down on them because they're educated. He sees them looking down on him because he's not educated. He's looking down on them because they are educated.
Yeah, exactly.
And And so his comments about dressing like fashion plates is an attack on what he sees as the symbolic displays of those things. And of course, as he falls into the same trap as many of these people that he looks down upon, in some ways he's almost worse because he fails to notice that the disdain and the arrogance that he sees in these other people not only applies to him at least as much, maybe even more so. And he doesn't recognize the hypocrisy of his attitude.
No.
So yeah, Keyes is
he's just a jerk. We don't like him.
Yeah.
He's just a jerk.
Anyway, Capstone only seems to tolerate Keyes because he's been successful.
Yeah.
And I get the feeling he would probably love to get rid of him because he's viewed as a troublemaker.
Well, because Keyes outright insults him to his, that's his boss, and Keyes insults him to his face too.
Yeah.
He's he's a jerk to everybody.
In some ways, I can sympathize with Keyes.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Because, see, part of the problem is that a lot of these people in charge of companies, they want their subordinates to be yes men.
Yeah.
And there are people around, and I won't mention any names, but maybe people like Keyes and myself, who are more interested in doing the job and more willing to call something bovine excrement when bosses are making decisions that make themselves look good in the short term, but are detrimental to the company in long term. Because usually once those bosses have leveraged their positions in their jobs, they move into other jobs. So
that makes me think of that scene in, I think it was Captain America, where Fury's talking to like the council or what have you, and they say, we've made our decision, and he's like, given that it's a stupid ass decision, I've elected to ignore it.
Well, see, that's the thing is there's a lot of people out there who work for companies that are troublemakers simply because they're troublemakers. And then there's people who are called troublemakers because they challenge the decisions that management makes because they're bad decisions. I once worked for a company, and I won't mention CompUSA by name. They bought Computer City from Radio Shack.
Right.
And in the brilliant move of the decade, sarcasm quotes there, they brought a lot of the management people at all levels, store levels, district level, head levels. They brought them over and put them into equivalent positions in CompUSA, which, I mean, on the surface, that's okay. You just ran a company bankrupt and you're going to put them in charge of your company. That's not a smart move. And the regional service manager for Computer City in the area where I worked at the time, which is Anchorage, Alaska, became the regional service manager for CompUSA for the region where I worked, which included Anchorage, Alaska. And at the time, we had a deal where you could bring your computer in, and for $29, and maybe I think it was probably $29.99, just under 30, so it sounded good better.
Yeah, of course.
We would take it in, we'd do a diagnostic and write up a report and tell the customer, okay, yeah, you're kind of on the fence as to whether you want to upgrade or maybe buy a new machine. Here's what we found out about your machine. Here's the problems with it. These problems could be solved by just simply upgrading these components. Here's the limitations to what you can do. Here's your options. And then, of course, we had an hourly service rate for shop services, actual services. Well, this regional manager who came over from Computer City, the company that was run into bankruptcy, he decided that he was going to institute a policy. And he was having a regional store service department managers meeting with all these service managers from stores in his area. And they would do this on speakerphone. So everybody heard it.
Mm-hmm.
And so what he told the managers of the stores he wanted everybody to do was get the customer in. If they're going to come in for the $29.99 diagnostic, have them sign the thing at the bottom that authorizes an extra hour of service at $80 an hour.
Ooh.
and then bill them, and then only give them the half-hour diagnostic, but bill them for both. And everybody heard that. Everybody in the region heard that. And so I went to my store manager and said, hey, this is what this guy said. And this is what he was doing. And he wanted the signs changed. Or no, he wanted the signs left alone so that it still showed the diagnostic. And I said, we need to change that and pull that down because we are not offering that service based on his policy and his direct instructions. And yeah, I was labeled a troublemaker for that. And of course, to make matters worse, the guy absolutely lied and said he never said any such thing, even though everybody heard it. So yeah, there's people like me who they look at it and they say, this is not a good decision for the company. I care enough about the company to recognize this is a bad decision. And Mr. Bossman, you're a moron and a jerk and a con man for instituting this decision. And yeah, that's who gets called troublemakers. And that's kind of what Keyes is here. I mean, yeah, Keyes is a real jerk, but he's not wrong. So, yeah. Keyes tells Capstone that he trusts his nose, and his nose is telling him that Steele's involvement in all this has a very definite fragrance. And he tells him, you put me back on the job, I'll get to the truth. Blaisdell responds, admitting that he doesn't have a lot of experience, but he has implicit faith in Mr. Steele and believes that Steele should be allowed to continue on the case. Capstone makes a decision. His decision is actually a pretty good decision. Yeah. He says Steele can continue and that Keyes is back on the case. So a kind of a two-track approach to this.
Yeah. Which makes sense given how much money that is on the line here.
Mm-hmm. And then proving that he isn't totally unwilling to be insincere and isn't totally unwilling to be a suck-up tells Capstone that his decision was a bold move.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Keyes, you just lost all credibility that I just gave you credit for.
Yeah, no, that's...
Anyway, we see Keyes step out of the elevator at Steele's apartment building and walk to Steele's apartment. He approaches, knocks on the door, and then getting no response, pulls out his pick lock set and lets himself in.
Which everybody has. He probably bought at the same store that every other character has ever picked a lock on this show bought this.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, he looks around for a few moments, then spots a notepad on the end table and reads, Flight 432, arrive Vegas, 12:20.
Because they always
the page from the notepad.
Write down their info and just leave it there.
That's right. Well, and then brilliantly, I'm going to take the page that you wrote down and you left there. I'm going to take it with me so that I can advertise that someone was in your apartment. They were looking at that note. They thought it was interesting and important, so they took it. Yeah. Brilliant way to be undercover. Anyway, after he folds the page and tucks it into his pocket, he wanders into Steele's bedroom, begins pulling out the drawers of the dresser, dumping the contents on the bed and pawing through them. Another brilliant move to hide the fact that you've ever been there. And
I don't think he's trying to be subtle. I think he doesn't care, frankly.
Well, that could be. Good. That could be. I didn't think of that, but yeah, you could be right. And of course, he finds a multitude of passports. He quickly thumbs through them and then goes to the phone beside the bed and picks up the receiver and dials. After a moment, he speaks. Betty, honey, put me on the next flight to Vegas. And listen, honey, this is important. Run the following names through the computer. I want every data source tapped. You ready? Michael O'Leary, Ireland. John Morrell, France. Douglas Quintain, England. Paul Fabrini, Italy. And Richard Blaine, Australia. No, honey, it's all the same guy. And I got a feeling his traveling days are over.
So I'm not an expert when it comes to insurance, but how much information would they have access to? Because it's not like now where, an internet search would pull up those names. Like he would have to have access to government databases, would he not?
Well, he would have to have access to something. I mean, or somebody.
International governments, because these are not U.S. passports. They're passports of different countries. So what are they going to run it through? They're not Interpol. Like, this isn't a police service. It's an insurance company. They're a private business.
Yeah. On the other hand, if if they're investigating crimes and they're a large enough insurance company that they would investigate crimes that have international ties, they might have contacts in various places that they can utilize, especially if they present it in the correct way. Hey, this
Fair
guy,
enough.
I suspect this guy is on your radar for crimes. He's a suspect in a insurance case involving, stolen jewels. And, we need to know what you know about him, and we'll keep you in the loop on whatever we find out about the guy. So it's kind of a, you wash my hands, I'll wash yours type thing. So,
fair enough.
Anyway, so then we come back from a commercial to a man in a fancy den who is raving.
He's not happy.
And he says, "This is what you came to tell me? I expect a check, and you come here empty-handed and tell me you're not paying me for my jewels?" And then we see that in the room with the man, and the target of his wrath is Everett Blaisdell, and also a stylish woman. Well, the man ranting at Blaisdell is Bradford Murdoch, and the woman is his wife, Valerie. Though Blaisdell tries to explain, Murdoch doesn't give him a chance, continues to berate the man, saying, "It's funny that your company expects me to pay my premiums on time. It doesn't work both ways, does it? Now it's
he's not wrong."
Yeah.
He's not wrong. He's a bad guy. We know this, but at the same time, he's not wrong.
Yeah. Insurance companies. Oh, you were standing in this spot? Oh, you were half a foot over the line, and so we can't pay you.
Guess we can't cover you.
Yeah.
Our
too
bad.
bad. So sad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as he's berating Blaisdell, his wife jumps in and calmly but firmly tells her husband to just let the man speak. And Blaisdell thanks her and then explains that the first priority of the insurance company in cases like this is to try to recover the stolen goods. And then he asks, "You do want your jewels back, don't you?" And of course he doesn't answer. The wife jumps in, assuring Blaisdell that, "Oh yes, absolutely, they want the jewels back. They have great sentimental value, at least to her." And she urges Blaisdell not to mind about Mr. Murdoch's attitude. He's just being a grump because the stock market's down. Or maybe it's because he arranged to have the jewels stolen for insurance payout. But anyway, Murdoch dismisses his wife. No, he dismisses her excuse, thereby dismissing her. Yes.
Pretty much.
Got it.
Yeah.
Saying that it's a matter of principle. And that as a stockbroker, if he ran his company the way the insurance company is run, he'd be sent to jail.
Again, he's not wrong.
Well,
yeah. It's one of those things where it's like, he's on a line, but he's not wrong.
But not really, because, stockbrokers, they invest people's money. And when it goes south, it was high risk, no guarantees.
They know that they're taking a risk, whereas theoretically with insurance companies, you're paying them so that if something happens, you get that money returned. And of course, then they'll find every excuse under the sun not to return it to you because that's how they make their money, right? But in this case, we know he's just making excuses because he doesn't want the jewels returned. Mm-hmm. He wants the money. That was the whole point of the hiring Grogan to steal them and getting the money. So,
the irony of this is that it's all focused on insurance company payouts and all this. And insurance is the biggest gambling racket of all.
Right? Like, of all the ways to try to scam money, this is one of the
Well, as a customer, it's a gamble because you're paying them money on the gamble that you're actually going to A, have a situation where you will get a payout.
Yes.
And B, that they will honor the payout. So, I mean, it's
in order to rent our apartment, we had to get renter's insurance, right? And we've been here 10 years, and thankfully nothing has happened to our apartment despite all the elevator fires. But, if we could go 20 years paying that same insurance month after month after month and never have
anything out of it. The only way you benefit from having insurance is if a disaster strikes.
Yeah, exactly.
The one thing you don't want to happen.
Yeah. I'm just going to say this to the heavens. I do not want the elevator to catch fire and to put not trying to invite disaster on my... Okay.
Anyway, Blaisdell tries one last time, saying that they will get back to the Murdochs when they have further news. But even before he can finish, Brandon Murdoch curtly says, yeah, sure. Oh, could he make it any more obvious that all he wants is the money and not the jewels? Well,
Not exactly subtle.
After Valerie Murdoch has escorted Blaisdell from the room, Brandon Murdoch makes a phone call, booking himself on the next flight to Las Vegas.
Except he doesn't give them any info. He asks when the next flight is to Vegas. Then he says, book me on it. Gives them names. Gives them the name Charles Johnson. Then just hangs up.
Fake name.
Gives a fake name and then just hangs up. No credit card details. No nothing. Like, just book me on it. Bye. This is the ultimate in TV script stuff, right? They're just like, okay, we're just meant to assume that whoever's on the other end of that phone call was like, Charles Johnson. Okay, here's all of his information. He's the only one in all of LA. I'm just going to book it.
That's right.
You'd have to sit there and you'd have to give like all of your info, including your credit card, especially like you
certainly now you would.
Well, I mean, now you'd probably just book it online. But you know, now like you could pull up a website and it would be easier. But even with like, you know, like Home Alone is another example. The second movie where Kevin is in the hotel and he's got that recorded thing of his voice saying, "Hello, this is Kevin McAllister, the father. I'd like a hotel room, please, with an extra large bed, blah, blah, blah." And then he's like, credit card? You got it. But there's no credit card actually mentioned. It just, you know, like. So I always find it funny when you see this in TV. They're just like, I'd like to book this. Here's my name. Okay, bye. Okay.
Well, it's shorthand.
Yeah.
Anyway, after he hangs up, after having given a false name, he opens the drawer to his desk, pulls out a revolver, opens the cylinder and inspects it, closes the cylinder back up, and then looks around as if checking to ensure that he isn't being observed.
Yeah. Dun, dun, dun.
We are now in Las Vegas. Steele is driving a bright red Corvette, smoking a cigar. Laura's in the passenger seat, and it's bad enough that she has to deal with the annoying cigar smoke. Wait a minute. Doesn't she have hay fever and allergies? Wouldn't she be having more trouble with cigar smoke than
only when it's
being
convenient
annoyed?
to the plot?
Well, but she's also not just annoyed by the cigar smoke. She's annoyed by the fact that Steele rented the most expensive car the agency had on the lot.
I'd be annoyed he rented a Corvette. I mean, in terms of sports cars, they're like the Wish.com sports car, you know, like there's a Ferrari and then there's the guy that couldn't get the Ferrari, so he bought the Corvette. That's what I'd be annoyed with. I'd be like, you could have
I've never been impressed by the Corvettes. Now, actually, I take that back. The early Corvettes and the early Thunderbirds, the 50s series, those were nice cars, but they became boats.
I just think they look hideous. Like, and the one that Steele's driving, I think it looks tacky. I don't think it looks, if he was trying to pass himself off as like an extremely high roller, that wasn't the way to do it.
Well, it could have just been the highest end vehicle that the rental agency that they had access to had. You know, there may not have been companies at that time that did rentals of high end vehicles like Ferraris and Lamborghinis and such as that. But anyway, Steele doesn't have a problem with it because he tells her it's all about image, because image is everything. And we know this because in the late 80s and early 90s, Canon Camera and Andre Agassi told us so.
Yeah, they told us that. Yeah, exactly.
And after all, he says they are in Las Vegas, home of the high rollers, and he's supposed to be Reggie Whitewood. I mean, what else would a profligate wastrel drive but the most expensive car that he could?
Yeah.
Laura snipes that the role suits him. And oh, by the way, once they do find Grogan, how does he intend to get Grogan to lead them to the jewels? Well, Steele doesn't answer. He just changes the subject onto the handling of the Corvette.
No idea. None whatsoever.
When you don't have the answer, just change the subject.
Yeah.
Anyway, they arrive at the Desert Inn Resort. Steele flashes a wad of money around, gifting the parking valets with generous contributions to their unreported income.
Yeah.
And witnessing his largesse, Laura looks at him with a horrified shock and dismay looks and demands to know just exactly what he's doing. He reiterates, image.
in defense of tips, I bought my first car with the tip money that I made at my parents' restaurant. So now, to be fair, this was 2010, and I bought a 1998 Dodge Stratus. So it was not a lot of tip money. It was, I think, $3,000 worth of tip money. But just saying, tips are good.
You realize now that the Canadian version of the IRS is now listening and going back through your records to see if you reported them.
I was going to say, I never said I didn't report it.
They're checking that now.
So,
just to make sure. At the check-in desk, Steele slaps the counter as somebody who is arrogant and gregarious and wants everybody to look at him would, and inquires if the presidential suite is available. Well, Laura panics, tries to cut in and asks how much the suite's going to cost, but Steele pushes her aside and then tells the desk clerk to proceed. And the name's Reggie Whitewood. He pulls out a bundle of cash. Wait, I thought he never carried cash. It's too bulky.
It's too bulky, yeah. What happened to that?
Yeah. And he gifts.
I guess he's got to be seen flashing it around.
Yeah. It's the part. It's the part.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he gifts the desk clerk $100 for his trouble. Having been checked in, he steps away, Laura following, telling him he's gone insane. Steele puts a reassuring arm around her, conspiratorially telling her that when you're $150,000 in the hole, what's a few thousand more or less?
I mean,
he's not wrong. But,
yes, but no. Like,
there's that old phrase about the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't think I'd be wanting to dig my grave even further, frankly. But well, especially when he doesn't have a plan.
Yeah. His plan is to have a plan.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, his plan is to wait till Laura has a plan. That's the plan.
That could be, yeah. Anyway, they make their way to the casino, and they suddenly stop, astonished by the sight of Mildred, decked out in faux fur wrap, gaudy faux fur hat, high-top boots, a long necklace, flashy earrings, and bedazzled dark sunglasses. As she greets Laura and Steele, Laura accusingly asks, "A few things, Mildred?" Yeah. Mildred says, "It's a great disguise. She's been around Grogan all morning, and he hasn't suspected a thing."
When Laura says, "Dear God, what is that?" all I could think of was the consequences to your actions, Laura. That is the consequences to your actions. You gave her permission to go nuts with the credit card in a casino. This is what happens. You've been warned. She looks like some sort of countess out of a 1950s Hollywood movie. That's your own fault.
Well, as Mildred preens and Steele admires, Laura
Steele
is
likes
shaking
the
her
outfit.
Oh, yeah, he thinks it's great. Perfect. In keeping with the plan.
Yeah, the character,
which he doesn't have but it's got... Anyway, Laura's shaking her head and tells them that they both got insane.
Yeah.
Then asks Mildred where Grogan is. But suddenly, Mildred has lost track of him. And Steele and Laura both let out a groan. Well, the trio splits up to begin to search for Grogan. As Laura's wandering through the casino, she hears someone call out her name. It's Norman Keyes.
Before we get to Keyes, I got to ask you a question here because I have been in a casino all of, 3 times maybe. I don't get the appeal. I just don't get the appeal. Now, the few times I've been, my couple of times were when I was a bit younger. My mom would give me $20, so I'd gamble with her because she likes going. And so I'd go and I'd gamble until the 20 was gone, and then I'd be done because I don't get the enjoyment. I don't understand why you like losing money. Like I don't know. But it's not just that. It's the atmosphere is so depressing. I mean, it looks all fancy in a James Bond movie, but when you're actually in a casino, it is a lot of like people just sitting around, pulling a slot or pressing a button. There's lights, there's sound, there's noise. It's like sensory overload. They sit there for hours. They're wasting their money, and it's just dull. Like it's just dull. I don't get the appeal at all.
I've never been. I even just seeing it on TV. I absolutely hear you about the sensory overload. I couldn't handle it.
Yeah. What?
Slot machines I see absolutely no appeal to.
Yeah.
The card games, I guess I can see some appeal to, because the game itself would probably be the
Yeah, it's a
type of
little
thing
bit
that
more of a
appeals to
game of
people.
skill.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a game. People like playing card games. I mean, that's why there's so many, Friday night poker get-togethers with
Yeah.
people. That's why Uno is so popular.
But
Um,
but the bulk of people that go to casinos go for the slots. They don't play the card games. I mean, people play them, but they're having been in a few, and one was like two. Niagara Falls Casino I've been in a couple of times, and the other one was in North Carolina when we were in Tennessee, and we went to to North Carolina. We went in there, and it was funny because at the time I was 20. Oh, I want to say 24, 25, something like that. And every time because when you leave the casino floor and go back on the casino floor, that's the people are watching you, right? And I must have gotten ID'd, I don't know, 5 times, because every time I walked off the floor and went back on it, somebody would stop me and say, "Can I see your ID?" And I'd be like, "Okay," and I'd show them my driver's license. So it was, in that sense, very flattering. So I was like, we don't think you're 21, but it was just like I said, it's depressing, and it's almost sad, like watching just this sort of like sea of humanity sit there and fritter their money away. And I wondered the reason I asked is because I don't know if you've ever seen that show Deal or No Deal. Have you ever seen that one?
No.
Okay. It's basically like a game show where there's like all these briefcases, and you're given an amount by the bank, and you're told you can either take that amount, walk away with it, or you can say no deal and pick a case, and that case may have more money or less money, and that will change the amount that you get. It's a U.S. game show. They brought it to Canada to have Canadian contestants play it. And then they did like a statistical analysis. I read this article that said that the Canadian contestants walked away with more money, not because they were better at the game, but because they took less risks. The Canadians were less willing to say no deal, let's take a gamble on what's in the other case. They were just like, cool, I'll take the money. Bye. Thanks for playing. Right? Whereas the American contestants were more likely to say no deal and roll the dice, so to speak. And so I was curious to see if that held true for you, if you would take the deal or no deal, or do the slot kind of thing. Or I'm not
No,
a fan of it. I don't know.
I'm more of a safe bet type person, and
Yeah,
I don't
same.
mean in the sense that I would do a lot of betting, but just from the standpoint of I'm fairly risk adverse.
Yeah. Same.
Averse, not adverse. No, I can
I like
understand.
my money. I like to stay in my
I
pocket.
can understand though why people do. I mean, you think about it. For decades, at least here in the States, they've been inundated with slogans and marketing from everybody from Publishers Clearinghouse to state lotteries.
Yeah, the lotteries.
You
too.
can't play if you don't, or you can't win if you don't play. And like pyramid schemes, they show these people at the top that won millions of dollars.
Yeah.
That could be you. And people buy into it. And I think there's just this idea that it could be me. And if I do it, I could be that person. And, you get newspaper stories that just also bolster these. I remember it would have been 30 years ago now, I guess. There was an article in I think it was the Anchorage Daily News, that there was a guy who had gone with his wife and maybe kids, I don't know, to Las Vegas or Reno or one of those places. And they'd been there for however long they'd been there. And they were back at the airport getting ready to get on their plane. And apparently they have slot machines in the airport in Las Vegas, in Nevada. And this guy missed his plane.
Oh my God.
Because he was collecting his winnings, something like $2 million.
Oh, okay. Well,
and so you get newspaper stories like that, and it's like, yeah. And I think that a lot of people have just been conditioned to think that, well, it's just $20. And then $20. Well, it's just $20. They and it's like government agencies or businesses that write these checks for $100, $100, and they wind up spending tens of thousands of dollars when they could have done the same thing with one check for less money and gotten more results, because they're only looking at, I'm only spending a little bit of money here right now. and they
Fair
don't
enough.
look at the big picture of how much they're investing or spending totally. And so I think that's one of the reasons why people do that. They lose so much money in slot machines because they don't think about how much they're actually spending and their odds of actually winning. And
the only lottery I will play ever is there's one that's local called the Dream Lottery. It's run through the hospital. And it's $50 for 2 tickets, so it's not cheap. But they run them once. They're 4 times a year they run it. And the jackpot is either a fancy schmancy house or $1 million cash. You get to pick. And the only reason I do that one is because the money goes to the hospital. I don't play with the expectation of winning anything. I play it as a way of donating. To me, it's a charitable donation.
Yeah.
Okay, you can have $50, and that means that the children's hospital gets $50, and I've won a couple times in the early draws a free ticket. That's about it. But
yeah, I mean, that's a little bit different because behind there is a charitable cause that presumably actually gets the money.
Well, I'm
Let's
hoping.
face it, because a lot of these so-called charitable organizations, they wind up spending 50, 75, in some cases, over 90% of the money that they bring in is spent on administrative costs and marketing. So, there's that too. But no, the local Harley dealership here has a deal that they do every year where you can buy a ticket. You buy a ticket for the possibility of winning a key, and the key, they have like half a dozen or a dozen people that win keys, and only one of the keys starts a motorcycle.
Win keys? We don't want to win keys. We hate keys.
But, you got a chance to win a chance. But I never do that, even though it's cheap and I would love to have a new Harley. But I don't do it because I'm risk averse and I don't see the
segueing us
value.
back to keys there with the keys.
Yes. Anyway,
that was my attempt.
Laura comes up. Yes. I wanted to have my say. Don't interrupt me while I'm on a roll. Keys comes up and introduces himself to Laura and asks if he could speak to her for a few minutes. She tries to make an excuse, but Keys won't have it. In a serious tone, he says it's about her boss. He's a fraud. Well, momentarily taken aback, Laura then gets a chastising look on her face, as if a parent dealing with an errant child has tried to slip an obvious truth or an obvious untruth past them. Well, next we see Keys and Laura. They're sitting at a small table. Keys is smoking his cigar and blowing the smoke almost, but not quite, straight into her face.
Right.
He asks if the smoke bothers her, although I really suspect that he doesn't really care.
No.
That it's more of a tactic.
Oh, absolutely.
Anyway, Laura dismissively says no, it doesn't bother her, at least not as much as he does. Nice one, Laura. Nice cheap shot there. Keys admits that he has that effect on people, and then in what has to be a intentional faux pas on Keys's part, or misstatement, he says it must be generic.
Yeah.
I'm sure he meant to say genetic, but I like the fact that it's
I gotta say, watching this scene and watching like other scenes like this, I'm really glad that you can't smoke in these sorts of places anymore, because as an asthmatic whose lungs are terrible, I was a kid, but I remember restaurants where people were smoking up a storm. It wasn't fun inhaling somebody else's secondhand cigarette smoke. So I'm not sorry that that's gone.
And then they did this halfway thing where they tried to satisfy the smokers and non-smokers. Sit over there and I'll sit over here and we'll pretend that smoke doesn't drift over.
Yeah, exactly. Smoke doesn't stay in one spot. Unless it's a closed door where it's not going to work that way.
Or unless you have something where you've got fans blowing it back into the faces of the people, generating it. Anyway, Keys asks Laura how well she knows Remington Steele. She sidesteps the question, telling him that she's been with Steele since he formed the agency. He asks if the name Michael. Yeah, that's kind of true. He asks if the name Michael O'Leary has ever popped up in conversation, and rather unconvincingly, Laura feigns ignorance of the name, asking who that is. Keith says he is under that name. Keith says Steele is under that name. He stole a painting called "The Five Nudes of Cairo." Laura tries to laugh it off. Keith continues, Under the name of Richard Blaine, he's being sought by the Mexican police in connection with the theft of some jewels called the Marchesa collection. Laura tries to dismiss Keyes' information, asking in an astonished voice where he's getting this stuff. Keyes firmly tells her that her boss has more aliases than a phone book.
What?
And the deeper he digs, the dirtier Steele gets.
Phone books don't have aliases. They have names and phone numbers. That's what they have. That's a phone book.
Yeah, well,
you don't see Mr. John Smith alias Bob Smith. Like, that doesn't happen.
Well, yeah, Keyes is...
He should have said he's got more names than a phone book.
Yeah, well...
I guess that's another, it's generic. Like, he's sort of screwing up his catchphrases here.
Yeah. He like my youngest daughter. I wish I could remember. I wish I'd recorded them. I wish I'd have saved them. She has this habit of using the totally wrong words sometimes. Yeah. I mean, I love my daughter, but she is that typical stereotype of the blonde airhead sometimes.
Oof.
Anyway, Laura claims to disbelieve Keyes and then tries to turn the table, asking him what made him pick up the shovel in the first place. Is it because he gets his kicks in rolling in the mud?
Don't want to know.
And yeah.
Don't need that info about Keyes. Nope.
Well, I think in the script we get a bit more insight into Keyes' character and how his seeming sense of responsibility and propriety mask an ego and a sense of superiority, like we talked about earlier, and that they are actually built on a basic lack of moral integrity.
Oof.
Because here at this point in the script, he says, I don't give a damn what anybody does in this crummy world until it becomes my business to give a damn. Go out and kill someone? Fine. It's nothing to me. But try an insurance scam, try to pull the wool over my eyes, that's another story.
Yeah. And that's they should have kept that line in there because it really does say something about him. He doesn't care about, he doesn't have a moral compass. This is not about right and wrong for him. This is about whether or not they've pulled a fast one on him.
Made him look bad.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it comes down to that insecurity, that deep-seated feeling of somebody's better than me or thinks they're better than me. So I have to prove they're wrong. And I'm going to nail them to the wall doing it. So, yeah.
Because it made me look bad. Yeah. Anyway, it's at this point that the script picks back up where the episode is, and Keyes tells Laura that it's because her boss stepped on his toes. Taking the Murdoch case away from him was a mistake because it made him angry, and it made him think. And the more he thought, the more he figured things didn't add up. Laura points out that Mr. Steele is trying to recover the Murdoch jewels for his company. And Keyes' response is a sarcastic, "Oh, is he now?"
Yeah.
Laura gives Keyes a knowing smile, accusing him of believing that Steele is in on the robbery. Well, rather than answering the question, Keyes tells Laura that she's so clean people could eat off of her. I mean, do body shots off her. Eat off of her. But he warns her the longer that she sticks with him, the grimier she gets. Again, from the script. Laura, you expect me to turn in my boss? Keyes, I'm doing you a favor. You'll come out of this looking so good, you'll be able to run your own agency. Laura, thanks, but I've got all the responsibility I can handle right now. Which
this is one of those situations where her playing the quote unquote unnamed associate really works in her favor. Because she can play dumb. Oh, he's my boss. I wouldn't know anything about that. And pretend that she has no knowledge of his actions or whatever it is and look innocent. She's got Keyes fooled here. Whether she's good at it or not is irrelevant. She has Keyes believing that she is completely oblivious to Steele's.
What I think is interesting is her response to Keyes' suggestion that she would be able to run her own agency. Thanks, but I've got all the responsibility I can handle right now. Because basically what she's saying here is that running her own agency would be more work than she could handle, which is sort of the very same prejudice and assumptions she's been trying to overcome all these years. And now here she is declaring that those prejudices and assumptions are valid. I mean, granted,
Right,
she's not sincere,
no.
but couldn't she have addressed Keyes' suggestion some other way that didn't put her down? Didn't
No,
demean
because
herself?
I think that's what she wants Keyes to see. I think she wants Keyes to see, because if she pretends to have those ambitions, or I mean, she has those ambitions. She is writing her own agency, but if she admits to having those ambitions, then Keyes might look at her differently and assume that she's in on what he's suspecting is the case, which is true.
I would think that if she said something to Keyes along the lines of, well, I've been planning to open my agency eventually. I guess this could help. What do you want? I think Keyes would have bought it, and
no,
she
I think,
wouldn't have had
that would make him suspicious, to be honest. I think because he thinks he sees her as he said, so clean he could eat off her.
A floor mat,
right? Yeah, like he sees her as being innocent and stupid, frankly.
Okay.
So if she says, "Oh, now that you think of it, or now that you mention it, I'd love to do that. Sure, I'll help you." It would look. I don't think Keyes would buy that. I think he only buys it if, when presented with the evidence, she turns on him. Then it's similar to what she did with Jarvis. Right? She denied it until she couldn't deny it anymore, and then she sort of pretends to turn on Steele because that's what they want to see. They think she's an innocent dupe, so she's going to play the innocent dupe until she can't anymore, and then she has to play the game then.
Okay. All right. Well, at this point, Laura, seemingly believing that Keyes really isn't interested in Steele's past, and believes his assertion that he's only interested in recovering the jewels and catching the thieves, offers, if she can not only convince Keyes that Steele had nothing to do with the robbery, but that he can also deliver him the jewels. And she leaves her sentence uncompleted, letting Keyes make up his own commitments, which is what will let him walk away a happy man. Again, Laura accepts his meaning as, that's all I'm interested in, as being the truth. Of course, he didn't actually say that, but okay, she buys it, or seems to. So Laura tells Keyes to come on. She's going to make him so happy he's going to hate himself. And he does. He does strike you as the kind of person who, if he's happy, he's unhappy about being happy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's the kind of person that no matter how good things are in his life, he's the kind of person that will deliberately find a reason to be miserable. 100%.
Well, next we see Remington moving through the casino, and there's suddenly loud cheering. We see Grogan at what I think is a craps table. And he's the shooter and is accompanied by a brunette with a head of hair that has to be seen to believed.
Yeah.
And apparently luck has been with him so far. Steele has obviously spotted Grogan, and hand over his mouth seems to be nervously watching as Grogan again throws the dice. Well, Grogan's throw is apparently less than what was hoped for, as we hear the crowd groan. Steele visibly disheartened, the brunette abandoning Grogan, and Grogan waving goodbye to his chips. As Grogan walks away from the table, a tall man steps up and puts his hand on Grogan's chest. Another man comes up from behind Grogan and asks if he's having a good time. Grogan is clearly uncomfortable with the development and becomes more uncomfortable when the first man tells him, "Let's take a walk."
Yeah, that's never good.
Well, the two men take Eddie Grogan out a back door into a secluded area and begin roughing him up, accusing him of having lied to Mr. Smith, the criminal who gets things done.
Most generic bad guy name ever.
Yeah. Well, Steele, who's been following, rushes out to find the men exchanging opinions, then interrupts, asking what seems to be the problem. One of the men tells him that there's no problem, and the other tells Steele to get lost. But the men give Steele an opportunity to throw a punch at one of the men, and the distraction allows Eddie Grogan to break free from the other, and then Grogan and Steele take off. Out on a sidewalk, Steele and Grogan are doing a fast walk. Grogan asks Steele what he's doing there. Steele replies that he's just here looking for some action. And who are those guys? Grogan says that, Grogan says,
they work for a friend.
Typos.
Yeah.
Auto incorrect is very generous sometimes of
it is.
replacing the word you meant with a legitimate word that you didn't mean. Anyway, Grogan says that they work for a friend of his. When Steele expresses surprise at Grogan's generous definition of friend, Grogan downgrades friend to acquaintance and then just says that there must be some sort of misunderstanding. Grogan spots a place that he suggests that they duck into, where the air is a little bit more unhealthy.
Yeah.
A little bit more unhealthy? What a line. What a recommendation for a place.
Yeah. The restaurant that kills your lungs.
Yes. Inside, a Frank Sinatra impersonator is singing. After listening a moment, Steele insincerely comments, "Uncanny similarity." Grogan, as you said, not catching the sarcasm, responds that the singer's got everything but Sinatra's salary.
Okay, so speaking of music and frustrations with music rights, this is still on the DVD? Like, I get it. It's not actually Frank Sinatra singing, but the music is still there. Like,
and
the
it's
music,
still copyrighted.
It's still copyrighted. They would have had to pay for it. It just...
Yep.
Sorry.
Bring in the dead horse, please. Dead horse, right over here.
Yeah, we're just going to beat it some more. Okay, I'm done. I just had to have my tiny little rant, and we can keep going.
All right. Steele comments on the atmosphere of the place and asks Grogan if he's a frequent visitor to the establishment. Grogan says, yeah, every time he gets a few bucks. Steele suggests that maybe he could entice Eddie into another game of poker. Grogan says, hey, I owe you, but I'm tapped out. And of course, Steele is stunned. He stammers, asking if Eddie means that the entire 150,000.
You can see the look on his face. It's just, it crumples because he's just, like,
and to add insult to injury, Eddie doesn't seem concerned.
No, he's like, you win some, you lose some, whatever.
It comes, it goes.
Whereas that's what I mean, though, by like, I cannot put myself into that frame of mind as somebody who could easily just lose that kind of money and be totally fine with it. Like,
I can't either.
The only way that my mother could even get me into those casinos was to give me a 20 and say, come and gamble with me. And once I was done with that 20, I'd be like, okay, I'll wait in the car. Like, I'm not gonna lose my own money. You want to give me money to lose? Sure, whatever. But I'm not losing my own.
I can't imagine it either. I mean, yeah. I might get in trouble for this.
I love it when he says that.
There's somebody that I'm married to that sometimes lets food sit in the refrigerator too long, leftovers. And it just really, it's like, I mean, that's just leftovers, you know?
Yeah. Well, yes, you can see why you wouldn't want to, like, he's just like, what? I just lost $150,000. Meh.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, there's no way I could be that flippant about losing that kind of money. Anyway, Steele inquires about the collateral that Grogan had bragged about, and Grogan says, well, yeah, he can't lay his hands on it right away. Well, Steele confronts Grogan on that point, reminding him that the previous night he had said that he could take Steele to it right away. Grogan says, well, he exaggerated.
Yeah.
Steele responds, you mean you lied? And, well, I mean, only if I lost.
This is, I love this. I love it. Only if I lost. Basically, the ultimate sort of excuse. It's only a crime if you get caught.
That's right.
It's like, better to ask forgiveness and permit. It's fine. Only if I lost. I was only in trouble if I lost.
Yeah. Well, Steele cuts to the chase, asking Eddie if he ever even had any collateral. And Grogan, seemingly not taking anything too seriously, says, yeah, sure he did. It's worth a couple of million at least, but he hawked it. He explains that he needed cash for the table. You see, there's this guy in town. He's kind of a pawnbroker. When you run out of legitimate credit, you take whatever you can get your hands on to him, and no questions asked. You've got 10 days to redeem it before he sells it. And I got 30 grand for this stuff. Steele practically chokes.
Like, at this point, if this was one of those cartoons, he'd have steam just shooting out of his ears, because like, this guy is adding one layer onto another of just like, are you kidding me? I had your money. I lost your money. Had the collateral, but I lied about getting it. Oh yeah, I hawked it for 30 grand. It's worth a couple million.
Yeah. Well, and Grogan's excuse is, well, you know, it was hot.
Oh dear.
Steele scoots closer to Grogan and tells him that if the stuff was as valuable as Grogan says it is, Steele can get him a lot more than 30 grand for it. Of course, Grogan is enticed.
Yeah.
Steele reminds him that, we do have to redeem the item from the current holder first. Grogan casually says, oh, yeah, that'll only take 50,000. Steele, again, just kind of loses it.
Yeah, he's got trouble forming words at this point. Like, he's just, the English language has abandoned him, and his mouth is moving, but nothing's coming out.
That's right. Yeah, and he's like, 50,000? And Grogan shrugs, telling him, hey, the guy's entitled to make a profit.
Yeah.
You think about that interest rate, 100% over 10 days. That's like, what, 5,000% annual interest rate?
That's crazy.
Steele asks, well, okay, exactly who are we talking about? And turns out it's somebody named Seymour Smith, works out of a suite at the Nugget.
I gotta wonder if this was like a wink to.
It could be.
Right? Like, because this does happen in film and television where they'll name characters after people that are either producers or work with the script writers or things like that. So I wonder if that was a nod to good old Seymour.
Anyway, Grogan jokes that 50,000 for a high roller like Reggie probably isn't a problem.
And he just shot himself, hoisted by his own petard. Like, this is the.
Or if you're a Star Trek fan, hosted by his own Picard.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Steele shrugs it off, saying, well, yeah, I mean, he spends that much in a week just on tips. Well, they shake hands as partners, with Steele telling Grogan that he hopes that they both get exactly what they deserve.
This is one of those, like, have the day you deserve when you say to people.
Yeah. Yeah. May you live in interesting times. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. He's going places. I don't know where, but places.
Next, we see Laura and Keyes walking the sidewalks of Las Vegas. Keyes isn't happy, believing that they've been on a wild goose chase, what Keyes calls a lovely walking tour of Vegas. He is convinced that Steele has put one over on Laura. But Laura insists that Keyes is wrong. Steele is on Grogan's trail. He's as bent on finding those jewels as Keyes is, and when Steele finds Grogan, he will turn him inside out.
Yeah.
Now they enter a place called the Buffet, where, much to Laura's chagrin and Keyes' disapproval, they see Steele and Grogan laughing it up, with Keyes sardonically observing that Steele certainly is giving Grogan a hard time.
Yeah.
And we reached that point you were referencing earlier, where Laura has no choice but to role play, realizing that she's been conned by Steele, calling him a treacherous snake. So with faux anger, she turns to Keyes and asks, how do we nail him?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, next we see Steele's not happy. He is confronting Laura, incensed that she told Keyes that she would help trap him. Laura snaps back at him, asking, what was she supposed to tell him? That he was a thief? That he is a fraud? He starts to respond, then stops, and chagrined admits that, okay, she's got a point. And since truth isn't an option, it's time for Plan B. And Laura inquires as to what exactly Plan B would be. Well, it seems simple enough to Steele. Treachery and deceit.
Yep, of course. I mean, that should be on their business cards. Remington Steele, treachery and deceit.
Sounds like a British law firm. If the hounds want a fox to chase, he explains they will simply provide one, with Steele getting Keyes out of Laura's hair while she moves on to the next phase of their master plan. Laura goes third person and says, and what's that? She asked with a feeling of impending doom.
Yeah.
Steele casually replies, raising $50,000. And of course, Laura does not react well to Steele's next phase.
No.
Steele assures her that it's merely a trifle, considering that it will net them Murdoch's jewels, Grogan a finder's fee, and their reputations restored. Well, Laura goes on a rant, reminding him with a great deal of intensity that they already owe the insurance company $150,000. And then there's the small fortune of expenses for things like the presidential suite, his high-end rental car, not to mention Mildred's outfit. And now he wants to add another $50,000 to the bill. Well, during her rant, Steele tries to placate her, but of course to no avail. In frustration, he finally tells her that Grogan gave the jewels to a quasi-pawnbroker. So in order to get them back, they have to get them out of Hawk. Laura, in frustration, simply asks why he simply doesn't steal them back.
Well, I mean, the
Steele-
answer here should be obvious. They didn't bring their crime clothes.
They can go buy some. I mean, with all the money Mildred spent on clothes, what's
That's fair, yeah.
$50, $100 for crime clothes?
Yeah.
Well, Steele feigns shock.
Yeah,
Absolute shock. And
Laura.
then, seemingly embarrassed somewhat, he confesses that, he had actually thought of that, but it's just too risky. Besides, he's already arranged to meet Grogan at 6 o'clock that evening to reclaim the jewels. And Laura practically blows her top, saying, why so early? Steele tells her that Grogan has to leave town, and he has some rather nasty characters after him.
Yeah. The steam's coming out of her ears now. It's the other way around.
And they could open their own laundry with all the steam they're creating.
Yeah, no
anyway, he mentions that he's had Mildred crunch some numbers on their current financial situation. Then he calls Mildred in to help bolster his position. Mildred comes in and, at Steele's direction, gives a supposedly glowing financial report stating that the total assets of the agency are approximately $72,000, which to me seems an awful small amount for an agency that is supposed to be a premier agency.
It does. I would think that their total assets would be, I mean, I get that this is for the purpose of the script, but still.
Oh, yeah. But you'd think, supposedly they're bringing in money hand over fist. But anyway, Steele smiles, thinking he's won the argument. But then Laura asks Mildred how much money can they actually get their hands on by 6 o'clock that evening. Well, Mildred sheepishly answers that they can only get their hands on about $3,400.
Yeah, well, in Steele's defense, he's not used to legitimately getting his hands on money.
Yeah.
He's not used to actually dealing with. To him, it's like, I'll steal it, or I'll con it, or whatever. Like, I don't think he realizes that assets doesn't necessarily mean assets on hand that you can physically.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just walk, and even if they did have, you can't just walk into a bank and withdraw $50,000.
Yeah.
There's usually like a holding period for amounts that large.
Anything over $10,000, or from $10,000 and up in the U.S., you got to fill out a bunch of forms.
Yeah,
because obviously you're a criminal.
Yeah, it would not be that simple to just.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm taking out $50,000 now.
Yeah, actually, if you deposit $10,000 or more, you have to fill out a bunch of forms because obviously you're a criminal. I made that mistake once. I was working for a company, and the woman who normally did the financial transactions for the company was gone. I had to do it, so I went and made a deposit, and it was over $10,000. I had to fill out a bunch of paperwork. And the next day, I was talking to her about it. She said, well, you shouldn't have taken in that much all at once. I thought I had to. Was I supposed to leave it sitting here? Yeah, for the next day. Just split it up.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, Laura tells Steele and Mildred to empty their pockets. Well, Mildred and Steele are hesitant, somewhat perplexed. But Laura explains that it's time for the old math major to go to work. And then she instructs Mildred to run down to a newsstand and get a book on casino odds, as she has to refresh her memory. Mildred takes off. Steele starts to protest, but Laura sternly tells him that she'd rather face the odds than vigilance insurance if they don't get the jewels back. And then she challenges him to come up with a better suggestion.
That's fair.
Now, Steele assumes a pouting position, and then Laura, in resignation, asks, all right, what do we do about keys? Well, next we see a bellboy or a messenger, I'm not sure which, walking through the casino calling for Keys. Keys answers the call, and the man tells Keys that he has a phone call and directs him to a phone. When Keys answers the phone, it's Laura. In a conspiratorial tone, she tells him he's on his way down, called for his car. Wouldn't say where he's going, but I got a feeling it's important. Steele walks past Keys, who begins to follow him. Next, we see Laura counting out the money she's collected. When Mildred returns with the books, Laura tells her that she's got $186.23 as her stake. Not much, but better than nothing. Concerned, Mildred asks Laura if she knows what she's doing. Laura replies, well, no, of course not, but that's never stopped them before.
That's a good point. Here's why I have another question about this, because obviously Laura is planning on counting cards, right? This is the intention that behind her learning about the games, and then basically using it to win on or so. And this is something I've always wondered, and maybe you don't know the answer to this, but it's considered. Is it considered illegal to count cards, or is it considered just bad form to count cards?
Okay. You're jumping ahead, but I happen to have the notes and the answer right here.
Cool.
Okay.
Because
Okay. Cheating in casinos refers to actions by the player or the house which are prohibited by regional gambling control authorities. Now, this may involve using suspect apparatus, interfering with apparatus, chip fraud, or misrepresenting games. The formally prescribed sanctions for cheating depend on the circumstances and gravity of the cheating and the jurisdiction in which the casino operates. In Nevada, for a player to cheat in a casino is a felony under state law. In most other jurisdictions, specific statutes do not exist, and alleged instances of cheating are resolved by the gambling authority, who may have more or less authority to enforce its verdict. Now, advantage play refers to legal methods used to gain an advantage while gambling, in contrast to cheating. Unlike cheating, which is by definition illegal, advantage play exploits innate characteristics of a particular game to give the player an advantage relative to the house or other players. While not illegal, advantage play may result in players being banned by certain casinos. Now, I had this farther down in my notes because at one point, Laura makes a comment about her appreciation for the game is strictly mathematical.
right.
Bingo, you're banned right there.
Yeah, like that's kind of what I was, because I've always seen like stuff in the movies and TV where they arrest you or they throw you out or whatever if you're counting cards. And I've always in the back of my head kind of wondered, like, there's, as you pointed out, difference between cheating and using your knowledge, because if you're smart enough, because frankly I couldn't do that, I suck at math. If you're smart enough to be sort of categorizing every card you see and then using that to determine the odds of what's in their hand versus your hand, that's just smart. But also, how do they prove that you're doing that? Like, how would they know that you're doing
well, you make a stupid comment about doing the mathematical things.
Don't say it out loud, but like, would it just be like somebody starts winning a lot so they can randomly accuse them of counting cards? Like, seems like an odd thing to be able to catch.
I don't know how they would necessarily determine that. I'm sure they have systems worked out where they if they see certain patterns, certain betting patterns,
right,
they assume that they're cheating. I would think that, okay, let's take the books that Laura's getting. They're gonna. One of the things about casinos for card games, as I understand it, is that they have more than one deck at a time in play. But even if they don't, the books are going to calculate, if you have these cards, then your odds of getting whatever it is that you're going for. If you've got certain cards, your odds of getting a full house or a straight or whatever are this.
right.
If you're playing blackjack, if you've got X number of points on your cards showing, your chances of getting a card that will beat the house but still keep you under 21 are this. That technically isn't card counting and technically isn't cheating. That would be advantage play. But I would bet, sorry, poor choice of words. I would bet that the casinos have a deal where if they see you betting a pattern based on things like those books, they would assume that you are doing that kind of behavior and possibly just ban you from the table or from the game or kick you out entirely and ban you forever.
Fair enough. Okay.
I'm sure that, because, as what's his name? Hoskins said in Sting of Steel, customers don't cheat us. We cheat the customer.
Yeah.
And it's all about the casino always winning. They don't necessarily win with any one particular person or any one particular bet, but overall, they're not going to lose.
Fair enough.
So anyway, where were we? Yes, outside the hotel, we see Steele peel out in his fire engine red Corvette. Keyes jumps into a taxi, telling the driver that they're trailing that Corvette, only they don't want him to know that he's being tailed. And the cab driver grins and then takes off. Back in the casino, Laura takes a last-minute look at one of the books, puts it into her pocket, and then tells Mildred she's ready. Actually, the fact that she has a book in the casino, that even might be just enough to get her kicked out.
Yeah.
Don't know. Well, Mildred isn't certain that it's such a good idea, reminding Laura of Mildred's misfortune in con. Laura insists. She sits at a blackjack table with Mildred standing behind. She gets dealt 2 cards, peers at them, and then at the appropriate time tells the dealer to hit her. She gets a king and turns over her first 2 cards to reveal a 10 and a 6. Mildred can't believe it. You hit on a 16?
Yeah.
And Laura tells Mildred that she can stay on one condition. She has to shut up. And actually, I'm not a blackjack expert, but my understanding is that the general rule is if you have a 17 or lower, you take a card. I don't know if that's actually true or not, but that's my understanding. Anyway.
That's what I was taught. My grandmother taught me how to play blackjack. So, yeah.
If you're over 17, chances are you're going to bust. But if you're under, chances are in your favor that you're not going to. Anyway, next we see that Steele, with Keyes following, has driven out into the desert. Confused, Keyes... I love this. Keyes asks the cab driver, what do they call this part of town? And the driver smiles at the stupidity of the question and answers, the desert.
This whole like scenario is hilarious because not only is it the wildest of wild goose chases, but Steele goes sightseeing. Like he has a good day. He drives around. He goes to see the Hoover Dam. He stops at a souvenir shop. Like he's having a good time.
Well, back in the casino, Laura's winning and Mildred is thrilled and impressed, tells Laura that she is the coolest cucumber she's ever seen. And then this is where Laura, feigning disinterest, tells Mildred that her appreciation for the game is strictly mathematical and she doesn't understand the emotional component.
Sure, Laura. Sure.
Yeah. Laura decides that blackjack, even though it's been profitable, it's not going fast enough. So she tells Mildred to collect the chips. Frankly, her dismissive treatment of Mildred here is a little bit insulting. She sounds like an entitled rich person speaking to a lowly servant.
She, at this point, even though she's claiming that the game appreciation for the game is purely mathematical, I think she's already sort of got gambling fever, and all she's seeing is dollar signs.
Yeah, but just the way she just dismissed, pick up my chips. You're my hired servant. Take care of this. And it just doesn't seem quite nice. But yeah, you could be right. It could be the start of that.
Oh yeah,
fever.
like I really think she's got tunnel vision right now.
Well, meanwhile, we see Steele at the top of Hoover Dam, as you mentioned, peering through one of the lookout telescopes and grinning maliciously.
Yeah, he's just
Keyes is watching in the cab from the distance, and the cab driver tells Keyes that the fare's up to $65, sir. And frustrated and short-tempered, Keyes snaps at the driver, telling him that he can read, and don't call him Shirley. I mean, don't call him sir.
Yeah. Well, it's extra funny because not only has he led him on a wild goose chase, but Keyes is paying for the privilege.
Yeah, that's right.
Of
course, Keyes is going to get reimbursed. He's going to turn it in for reimbursement. Yeah. So it's not like it's really coming out of his pocket. It's just that it's one additional annoyance because now he's got to fill out the paperwork on that. Yep. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, and then he has to get a receipt from the cab driver. Oh, that's a hassle, I'm sure. Back at the casino, Laura, book in hand, and Mildred are standing together, with Mildred looking concerned and telling Laura that she doesn't know the game and how she herself had played Baccarat for 12 straight hours in con, won and lost tens of thousands of dollars, and still doesn't know the first thing about the game.
Okay, so this is the point where I say, why not let Mildred play? Because Mildred, granted, lost all the money eventually, but she was up. And she's freely admitting she had no clue what she was doing. So,
well, I think it's that plus the fact that she lost all the money. I think that's what would override the possibility of letting Mildred do it.
Fair.
Because Laura thinks that she's got the mathematical savvy to know how to win and when to stop. So, I think it's a little bit of, those math department people are real arrogant. And so I think that's what this is.
Math jerks.
Yeah. Anyway, still looking at her book. but assuming an air of experience, Laura tells Mildred that you either bet on the player or you bet on the bank. And then, in what seems to be an obtuse concession to her lack of knowledge, says, well, anyway, that appears to be all that it is to it. Well, collecting a handful of chips from Mildred, she says, I'm game. Back at Hoover Dam, Steele pulls up to the gift shop, goes in and purchases an item. Keyes follows Steele into the gift shop, except Steele isn't anywhere to be seen. Keyes asks the gift shop employee if there's a back door, and the man directs him to the door. Next, we see Steele in the Corvette peeling out of the parking lot and then headed down the highway. And in the cab, Keyes is fuming, realizing he's been had. He drove all the way to Hoover Dam to buy postcards.
And I mean, obviously, this is going to tip him off too that Laura's not on his side.
Well, no, because she framed it as she didn't know what was going on. Just that he called for the car.
True, that's true.
It sounded like, and she thinks.
Yeah.
So she's kind of gave herself a little cushion there. Anyway, it's night now, and we're back in Las Vegas. Steele screeches to a halt in front of the hotel. Inside, he heads to the casino where he spots Laura, who is acting crazed. Steele recognizes that she has gambling fever.
All the composure's gone. It's completely like she's lost the plot.
Steele recognizes that she has gambling fever as she tells Mildred to put everything behind the pass line. Mildred explains, that's $30,000. But Laura is a woman possessed. Steele calls to her, but she doesn't hear or doesn't care to hear.
Yeah.
She throws the dice. She hits. Steele again calls out to Laura, but a man in a pseudo Hawaiian shirt tells him not to interrupt her. She's held the dice for 15 minutes, and it's the best streak he's ever seen.
Yeah.
Steele rushes forward, yelling her name to try to be ecstatic about, or yelling her name, something, or I don't know what my notes say. Anyway, he's trying to get her attention above the din of the excited onlookers. He grabs her hand, which again is holding the dice and ready to throw, and he demands to know from Mildred how much they're ahead. Well, $60,000. So Steele and Laura wrestle over the dice. Steele trying to make her.
She bites his hand. She's literally gone so feral that she bites him.
Well, this is what's funny. Steele's trying to make her understand that she doesn't know what she's doing. She doesn't understand. She can stop now. She needs sleep. And Laura, nearly insane from gambling fever, yells that sleep is for cowards and bites his arm. The only thing really in the commentary about this episode is that line, because this was apparently spoken by somebody in like a pool tournament, a televised pool tournament.
Wow.
When somebody said that that person needed sleep, they responded that sleep was for cowards. So they stole that line from somewhere, but it's a good line. Anyway, Steele manages.
She bites him.
I actually, I didn't think to look cowards. I didn't bother to check in the script to see if that bite was
whether it was scripted or just
scripted or not. Yeah.
I think that, anytime Steele might have imagined Laura biting him, it wasn't in this particular context. I'm just saying. If that fantasy entered his head, it was a very different situation.
Nope, it's not in the script. That was
the bite.
That was either an impromptu. It was either an impromptu by Stephanie, or somebody came up with that bit of business in the moment.
That's funny. That is funny. Which just still goes to show, if Stephanie improvised that, she spends a lot of time playing the straight man, but she's funny when there's moments where her character does this kind of stuff. It's hilarious. It's good. Like, she's just.
Anyway, Steele manages to wrest the dice out of her hands, placing them on the table and announcing that the lady retires. Steele picks her up, throws her over his shoulders, and she yells, protesting, as he carries her away.
I love this. I love it. I love it. I love it. It's one of my favorite moments from the series. Just her like hoisting her up and her like flailing like a small child that doesn't want to go to bed, and he's just carrying her away. It's great. It's fantastic.
Well, we have a short time jump. We're still in the casino, and we see Steele standing, pacing, and then behind him we see Laura sitting.
I wonder how long he had to hold her until she like calmed down. You know.
I don't know. It's got to be several minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and he probably got her over to a bench and then put her on the bench and then held her onto the bench, talking to her like a 3-year-old. You know, you've got to come.
Now, if I let you go, you can't run away. Do we understand? Don't bite me again.
Yeah, really. Steele comments that Grogan is late. Laura, recovering from her gambling fever, is very subdued and chagrined. She tells Steele that she owes him an apology for having acted unprofessional the short time earlier. Steele gives her an out, telling her that it was only natural. After all, she was on a fantastic streak.
Even he recognizes that it was like...
Well, despondent, she insists that she embarrassed herself. Steele smiles, shakes his head in bemusement, and calls her remarkable. He points out that she came to the rescue by parlaying a pocket full of change into $60,000 and then gets upset because she got a little bit carried away.
Yeah.
But Laura, she's not willing to let Steele let her off the hook. She despairs the fact that she was willing to risk everything on the next roll.
He's not even letting her off the hook. He's complimenting her.
Well,
right?
He's doing both. He's doing both.
He says like because he compliments her on how like she took a pocket full of change and turned it into $60,000, and he's sort of there's admiration in that, and then he's sort of like it's bemusement, but it's kind of like affectionate bemusement because he's like, only you would have an issue with this.
Yeah. You did
sweet,
well,
and
you're unhappy about it. Yes.
It's quite sweet.
Steele gently reminds her that all it means is that her reaction makes her human. And as he adds, appealingly human.
And then I think that kind of comes down to some of the core of all the stuff we've talked about, the two of them, with Laura always needing to be in control, with Laura needing to be the one that's like, I think for her, this loss of control, she doesn't like being human. She likes feeling like nothing can put one over on her. And Steele,
a little bit like
he likes, well, in a way, but it not quite so
malicious,
narcissistic. Yeah, it's not malicious. It's more just that she's coming from a background where so many things were out of her control that she needs to have control somewhere. But with Steele, I think this is his way of saying, I like seeing you not lose control per se, but I like seeing you be human. Like mistakes are part of our experience as people, and allowing herself to make a mistake. I mean, he makes enough of them for the both of them. So like this is his way of saying like, this is okay. It happens to everybody. Go with it.
Well, and in some ways, like I said, Laura's attitude is similar to Keyes's, except that hers is directed inward and his is directed outward at everybody else. So anyway, next we see Grogan walking through the casino, presumably on his way to meet with Steele and Laura. But he's intercepted by Bradford Murdoch.
Yep.
Grogan, not realizing entirely the situation, but at least having a hint, is only slightly nervous when he greets Murdoch. Murdoch pulls open his jacket to reveal a gun. Grogan looks at the gun, then Murdoch's face, and then Murdoch guides him away.
Yep.
Outside, Murdoch is guiding Grogan down the sidewalk until they get to the end in the side of a building, which is presumably into an alley. Murdoch roughly shoves Grogan around the corner of the building and then up against the wall, telling him that he was supposed to return the jewels and demanding to know where they are. Grogan says that Murdoch owes him $10,000. Well, he's got a pair. Murdoch
really
laughs.
does. Like, the man's got a gun in his face, and he's got the nerve to say, "Yeah, but you owe me money. I double-crossed you, but you still owe me." Like, come on.
And see, that's kind of the thing I was talking about with Grogan is is you vacillate between disliking him because he's a sleazeball
Yeah.
and kind of feeling sorry for him because he's so clueless.
You
know?
admire I guess you admire his moxie, even if it's gonna get him shot. It's
Yeah.
impressive to see somebody
Well,
who's
except
so
I don't think it's Moxie so much because Moxie is confident.
yeah.
I think Grogan's more like of a in a daze,
Yeah,
but
fair
you owe me
enough.
$10,000. Well, excuse me, I've got a gun pointed at you.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
That's fair. That is fair. Yeah.
Anyway, so Murdoch laughs and tells Grogan that he's a prize. First he double crosses him and then he still wants his money. He grabs Grogan by the jacket and threateningly he tells Grogan that he's lucky Murdoch doesn't blow his head off because he wants the jewels. Grogan tells Murdoch he doesn't have them. Probably not a good thing to say, since Murdoch decides that that's reason enough to pull his gun and shove it hard against Grogan's chest. And realizing the precarious nature of his situation, Grogan meekly says that he can get them.
I think Grogan was hoping that saying he didn't have them would be the thing that keeps him alive.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
It makes sense, but yeah. Anyway, Steele is standing in the casino, looking around, briefcase in hand. After a few moments, he wanders over to Laura and says that, well, maybe he should just go visit Grogan's pawnbroker himself. But having spotted Keyes, she tells him that she thinks the issue just became moot, jerking her head toward Keyes to indicate his presence. And we can see that Keyes is clearly irritated. Laura and Remington split up, with Keyes rushing up to Laura, demanding to know if that was Steele. Laura insincerely tells Keyes that she tried to stall him. Keyes urges her to go with him because if they hurry, they can catch him, and he can feel the noose tightening. Next, we are in the suite of Seymour Smith, Grogan's pawnbroker, who is dealing with a customer who is clearly despondent. Smith is holding a fancy watch and counting out $500, telling the customer not to feel too bad. After all, he isn't selling it outright. All the man has to do is come back within 10 days with $1,000 and the watch will be his again.
I have to wonder how often that happens because I realize, again, I've never been inside a pawnbroker store or anything like that. I know that this is how the business works. You sell your stuff, they sell it to someone else, but you do have a period of time where you can come back for it. I wonder how many times that actually takes place. I'm guessing not a lot.
Well, it could be one of those things that surprises us by how often it occurs.
That's true.
I don't know. I would hope that most people, if they reach that point, have enough sense to stop.
Mm-hmm.
But, that might be giving people too much credit.
Too much credit.
Anyway, Smith escorts the men out and then turns to one of his henchmen who's there in the room with him and comments, "The poor suckers will never learn." Thank God.
He doesn't think they're coming back.
Yeah. No, he knows they're not coming back. They're just going to go down and gamble it and lose it. On the other hand, Murdoch, the phone rings and Smith steps over to answer it. On the other end of the phone is Murdoch standing with Grogan next to him. Murdoch claims to be a blackjack dealer over at the Desert Inn, and he understands that Smith is looking for Eddie Grogan. Smith affirms the inquiry, and Murdoch claims that Grogan is at the Desert Inn spending money like a crazy man. Smith tells Murdoch to stop by the next day, and he'll have something for him. Then Murdoch leads Grogan away. Back in Smith's suite, Smith tells his two henchmen that Grogan is at the Desert Inn, and the two men leave. Down in the casino, Murdoch, keeping Grogan under his thumb, watches as Smith's men leave the hotel. Next, we see Murdoch holding the gun on both Smith and Grogan. When Smith asks Grogan what this is all about, Murdoch fills in the blank. It's about the jewels. Smith is disbelieving, insisting that Grogan admit that this is some sort of a gag. And Grogan gives Smith a look of surrender. Then Murdoch demands that Smith get the jewels. Smith starts to say that Murdoch has to be crazy, that the jewels, but he never gets to finish. Murdoch interrupts, saying that he knows all about them, and again demands that Smith get them. Smith tells Grogan that he and his pal are dead. Then he moves to the safe. He opens the safe, pulls out a briefcase, and then quickly turns and throws the briefcase at Murdoch, who falls over backwards. Grogan grabs the briefcase, runs out of the suite, and as he runs down the hallway, we hear 2 gunshots. Then as Grogan runs through a door off the hall, we see Murdoch come out of Smith's suite and begin running down the hall, following Grogan. At the same time, the elevator doors open and Steele walks out, carrying the briefcase with the money in it to get the jewels out of Hawk. And he goes down the hall to Smith's suite. Inside the suite, Steele finds Smith on the floor, dead. Steele begins looking around and then moves over to Smith. Steele kneels down next to Smith's body, leaning over to listen at the chest for a heartbeat. And as he's doing so, we hear Keyes say, "Well, well." Steele looks up saying, I know this doesn't look good. But he stops as Keyes pulls out a gun, telling Laura to call the police. Laura hesitates, and Keyes tells her that the longer she delays, the more he's going to think that she's a part of it. So Laura steps over, picks up the phone. "Hello, crime scene. You don't go around touching things like the telephone."
Well, they do. They do all the time.
Anyway, with the phone, Laura moves back toward Keyes, Steele with a disbelieving look on his face. Standing off to one side and behind Keyes, Laura picks up the handset from the base of the phone and then suddenly hits Keyes over the head. Keyes collapses to the floor unconscious. Now, look, I know those things are hard plastic and getting hit over the head is going to hurt. I don't think it's going to knock you out.
Well, but it's TV. It has to knock you out when it's convenient to knock you out.
Okay, fine.
It's
Yeah,
not
for the
convenient
script.
to knock you out. It doesn't convenient.
With a sense of urgency, Laura tells Steele that she has only one piece of advice for him. Run!
Yeah.
And I don't have this in my notes, but I like the way Brosnan does that. He doesn't get up and run. He crawls on his knees for about 3 or 4 paces and then gets up and runs.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that part is good.
Down in the casino, Grogan is quickly making his way through with the briefcase. Then we see Murdoch searching through the casino. Then we see Steele searching through the casino. In the rows of the slot machines, Steele spots Grogan in the next row and demands to know what happened. Grogan looks at Steele. Then he looks around as if looking for an avenue of escape. Grogan spots Murdoch across another aisle of slot machines, and Murdoch, having heard Steele call to Grogan, spots Grogan in return and quickly moves to maneuver around the rows of the machines. Grogan tosses the briefcase he stole from Smith to Steele, hollering, "Here, Reggie, they're all yours," and then he takes off. Steele hollers after Grogan, then picking up the 2 briefcases, begins to move toward the end of the aisle, still looking for Grogan. Murdoch slips behind Steele, shoves a gun into his back, and demands, "Give it to me." Steele, not understanding, asks what Murdoch wants. The man clarifies he wants the briefcase. He grabs one of the briefcases from Steele, apparently not recognizing that Steele has 2 briefcases, and presuming that the one he sees is the one he seeks. So, briefcase in hand, he takes off. We see Grogan running through the casino, only to spot Smith's goons, who also spot him. So Grogan turns and runs in the opposite direction. Murdoch, having made his way outside to the sidewalk, quickly opens the briefcase to check the contents. It's full of cash. It's the $50,000 Steele had taken to Smith to pay off.
So he just drops it on the ground?
Yes.
Why? Why would you do that?
With the wind blowing the money all down the sidewalk.
I just keep the money, dude. What is wrong with you? Why would you just drop it? Help me figure this out. Make this make sense.
Tunnel vision. It's not the jewels. It's not what he wants. It's
50 grand.
It's a hazard. It's a distraction. It's not. Yeah.
You close it. You carry it with you. My God.
That's right. Inside, Laura is running between the slot machines searching. She spots Keyes running through the aisles, intent on catching Steele. Catching up to Steele, Keyes grabs him, announcing, "You shouldn't have killed Smith. You're going away for a long time." As this is happening, Grogan begins to run past with Smith's 2 goons behind him and within arm's reach. Grogan and the goons overhear Keyes and all stop running. One of the goons asks, "You mean he shot Seymour?" referring to Steele. Grogan, seizing the opportunity to throw Steele under the bus and detract attention from himself, says, "Yeah, that's right. He shot him." Well, one of the goons shoves Keyes out of the way, and then the 2 goons begin to attack Steele. Using the briefcase he still has in his hands, he hits back at one of the attackers, knocking him down. The second man grabs Steele, but as he begins pounding on Steele, Laura, head down, runs up and plows into the man. Her speed and momentum propel them both away from Steele and send them flying into a nearby
tackle. It's a good tackle.
Sends them flying into a nearby blackjack table. sending the cards, chips, and patrons flying. The man gets up and begins to head back towards Steele. But Steele, having dispatched the first goon with a punch to the face, is already moving toward the second goon, arm cocked, and dispatches him as well. In the meantime, Keyes, who has collided with a casino patron, is on the floor near the briefcase. Spotting it, he grabs for it, then begins climbing to his knees. But Grogan also spots it, comes up running, shoves Keyes back down to the floor, grabs the briefcase, and begins running off with it. Keyes climbs to his feet and gives chase, and Murdoch is also seen giving chase. Running outside, Steele and Laura come upon the scene of pedestrians grabbing...
this. Can you imagine? Like, Laura, she went through all that to get that money. And it's just a free-for-all. Everybody's grabbing it left, right, and center, and she's just horrified.
Yeah, they're stuffing it in their pockets, stuffing it in their purses. And she's just absolutely stunned by this sight.
She tries to race around and grab a couple, but it doesn't. She misses.
Yeah, but by the time they get to the case,
gone. It's been just
they've
devoured.
only got a couple of bills in their hand. The briefcase has been picked clean.
All that money that she won, and it's just gone. I cannot. I'd probably just sit down and cry. I'd be like, okay, I'm done. I'm just going to sit here and cry for a bit.
Well, defeated, she opens her hands, releasing the few bills that she had managed to snag. Lets them blow away and says, oh, well, easy come, but she doesn't finish the saying. They spot Keyes chasing Eddie Grogan, briefcase in hand, down the sidewalk. Keyes makes a flying tackle, landing on Grogan, grabs the case, slaps Grogan's face, and tells him, looks like these jewels are going back where they belong. Then he starts to get up. A voice from behind Keyes affirms Keyes' conclusion, saying, that's right. And with the two of you finally gone, that'll be the end of it. Keyes and Grogan look up to see Murdoch, standing over them, gun in hand, pointed at the two. Except, of course, that Murdoch forgot about Laura and Steele.
Yeah.
Steele rushes up, grabs Murdoch's arm, and raises it just as he begins to pull the trigger. The shot goes wild into the air and comes down who knows where.
Yeah, because it never comes down. It just goes up and it disappears. It disintegrates.
That's right. Nobody's ever been damaged by bullets falling out of the sky.
It just disappears. Yeah, of course.
Steele grapples with Murdoch, pulling the man's arms behind his back, forcing the gun out of his hand. Laura picks up the gun from the ground. As Steele continues to hold Murdoch in check, he calls out to Grogan, counseling him, never bet against the housemate. Well, we are now back at Eddie Grogan's favorite club. The Frank Sinatra impersonator is singing, slightly off key, presumably as a tribute to Frank Sinatra, who also had a tendency to miss the notes for which he was aiming. That's going to get me in trouble with some people, but I don't care. I'll take Bing Crosby over Frank any day.
You know, it's I think that Sinatra
overrated.
Okay, so this is going to get me in trouble too, because I can appreciate the style and I can appreciate like the music in and of itself, but it's not my first go-to. Like I like some of the songs and I do enjoy. I Did It My Way is a great song, but yeah, I like him a lot better than Michael Bublé. I'm sorry to my fellow Canadians. You're giving me a confused look.
Excuse me?
Is that because you like him or you've never heard of him?
Michael Bublé is great.
Okay. I knew I was going to take somebody off. I cannot stand Michael Bublé.
Sinatra, you can't find a song that he's recorded where he hasn't missed at least a few notes. But I mean, Bublé is great. I love Bublé.
Okay, I cannot stand I call him Michael Bubbles, and I can't stand him.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are looking for a new co-host for the podcast.
He just co-hosted Canadian Music Awards, the Junos. He was the host, and yeah, I don't know what it is, but I'm not a fan. So I can appreciate Sinatra at least, but I'm not a fan of Michael Bubbles.
I've never been a Sinatra fan. I've never liked his voice. And honestly, I can't, I think you would be hard pressed to find a recording of his where he doesn't miss some notes. He's constantly missing the notes.
I'll try harder on Michael Bubbles. I'll give him another shot.
But yeah, Bublé, Bing Crosby, Dean Martin, I love those guys. I love that kind of music. Anyway, where were we? Yes. We pan to Steele and Laura and Mildred and Keys, all sitting at a table, briefcase of jewels in front of them. Mildred is picking up a piece, admiring it, exclaiming, "They're really paste?" Keys assures her that they are. She continues, "And this whole thing was about fake jewels?" Well, the final story comes out. Murdoch had been speculating in the commodities market, essentially gambling. To cover his losses, he sold the original jewelry and replaced it with paste so that neither his wife nor anyone else would suspect that he was in trouble. And when things got worse, Murdoch hired Grogan to steal the jewels for the insurance money. Murdoch didn't tell Grogan that the jewels were fake. He simply gave him instructions on how to pull off the robbery and told him to just return the stuff the next day. Grogan, not knowing that the jewels weren't real, decided to double-cross Murdoch and use them to finance his Las Vegas gambling foray by pawning them to Smith. But when Smith realized that they were fakes, he thought Grogan was trying to pull a fast one. Murdoch was after the jewels because if they were recovered, his scam would be revealed.
So when they call the jewels paste, they're not literally made out of glue, are they? Like, is that just a word that means fake, or?
I don't know.
Cool.
What
okay.
are paste
Maybe.
jewels made of? Google is our friend.
Google is our friend. Should have looked that up.
According to Google AI, which has been known to recommend that you use white glue on your pizza to keep the cheese from sliding off.
Well, that would do it. They're not wrong.
Well, no, they're not wrong.
You're not going to want to eat it, but still, it'll keep the cheese from sliding out.
You achieve the result, not in the way you want, not in a way that's serviceable, but you achieve the result. Yes.
I think that's actually AI in a nutshell. It'll give you an answer.
Artificial idiocy. Paste jewels or imitation gemstones are made from a type of leaded glass that is hand cut and polished to mimic the brilliance and appearance of real gemstones.
Okay.
So there you go.
Yeah.
Anyway, where was I? Oh, yes. Keys stands up. He's got to get back to the home office. He adds that since the agency saved Vigilance Insurance from making a $2.5 million payout on fake jewelry, they're going to write off the $150,000 that had been loaned to the agency as part of the recovery plan with Grogan.
Well, no insurance company would do that. Sorry.
Actually.
Okay. I could be wrong, but I just didn't.
I think Keys is spinning.
Oh, okay. Fair.
Because.
Yeah, because he was.
Either
wrong.
way, they've got to pay the agency's bill.
Yeah, that's true.
There's an invoice coming from the agency, and they could make sure that equals $150,000.
We'll just call it even. We just won't make you.
That's right.
That's a good point.
I mean, they could say, well, no, you owe us $200,000 for services rendered, but we'll settle for the $150,000. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Laura is happy. She claps in excitement. And Mildred asks about a finder's fee.
Speaking of Moxie, Mildred has got a lot of balls, pardon the expression, to ask about a finder's fee after all of this.
Well, Keys laughs and says, a finder's fee on paste? He picks up one of the pieces, looks at it, and hands it to Steele as a memento. Then he asks Steele if he's a betting man. Steele doesn't respond immediately, but when he hesitantly says that Laura is the gambler of the organization, Keys says, I'm willing to lay you odds I'll be seeing you again, Steele, or whoever you are. He laughs a malicious laugh and then turns and walks away. Puzzled, Mildred asks what Keys meant by that. Steele, trying to cover, makes the excuse that, every good detective has many faces. Mildred stands and announces that she's leaving to cry. After all, they had all that money.
I know.
After Mildred is gone, Laura comments that they still have about $10,000 left over, which should just about cover their Las Vegas expenses. And as the third-rate impersonator of a second-rate crooner begins to sing Street of Dreams...
He's not singing any Michael Bubbles. Sorry.
I am just getting myself into so much trouble with so many of our listeners. Laura and Steele get up and head outside. As they are walking down the sidewalk, the wind gently blowing their hair, Steele pats around in his jacket and reaches into his pocket and pulls out the souvenir Keys gave him and looks at it. Thoughtfully, he comments that it looks awfully real. Laura suggests that he could probably palm it off on some poor, unsuspecting soul. Steele drops the piece to the ground, almost as if it had burned his fingers.
Yeah.
The camera focuses on the piece of jewelry as it lay on the sidewalk, with Steele and Laura in the background, out of focus, walking away. And with a tone of concern, he tells Laura that if he's not careful, she could make an honest man out of him. To which we hear Laura respond, "I'm counting on it, Mr. Steele." All to the tunes of Sweet Street of Dreams. This is a great ending. It's a great bookmark to the opening.
It
Or
is.
a bookend to the opening.
Yeah, it's good. And my only question is, like, he drops it on the ground as if to sort of reject the concept of pawning it off on some unsuspecting person. But some unsuspecting person could still come along, pick it up, and try to, try to sell it for something. But I do appreciate it as an ending because, and I would have, and not to beat a dead horse, but if this were set up against the last episode, this would be maybe an even better setup for what inevitably ends up happening in the last episode, right? But even still, it's a nice moment.
Yeah.
Right. She reminds him, you could do something dishonest with this. And he and the fact that she even has to remind him, I don't think he was thinking of that. He was just sort of admiring the fact that it was good workmanship.
In some ways, I almost think that his comment that it looks awfully real is almost a commentary on the dream of places like Vegas.
Yeah.
It looks real, but it's not really real.
Yeah, it's all glittery, and then you get there, and it's not quite so nice. The core is rotten. The outside looks nice, but what you see is definitely not what you get.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree. I've never been to Vegas. I've been to a lot of states, but Vegas is not one of them. Well, I know Vegas isn't a state, but Nevada, I've never been through Nevada. I know my geography. Don't give me that face.
Well, I don't have anything else. You got anything else?
No, really. I mean, this is a solid episode. There's some
It is.
really good moments. We got the introduction of Keys, who unfortunately we will see again.
Yeah.
But again, props to James Tolkien, who just plays the most despicable characters, and it does it so well because
in an almost endearing sort of way, but yes.
Yeah, like he's supposed to be hateful. You're supposed to hate him and just want to punch him in the face repeatedly, and he achieves that. He probably puts that on his resume.
And you would feel good about it.
Yeah, it's probably on his acting resume. Punchable face. But yeah, no, there's the moment with Laura at the gambling table, Steele living the high life, the whole setup, Mildred and the furs. It's a good episode. I like it.
Yeah, it's a great script by Melvoin. So yeah, well done, Jeff. I
kudos.
You've made up for the issue we had a couple episodes back. Okay, buddy.
Yeah, Eric has forgiven you. You can sleep at night now.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, hey Jeff, why don't you come on the show now? Come on.
Sure.
Anyway, yeah, I'd love to have you and talk over your scripts, and I can congratulate you and chastise you in person. Anyway, if that's it, then we'll remind everybody about the website, SteeleWatching.com, where you can find things like the show notes, Amazon links to the movies that we don't have for this episode. We don't have any.
Yeah, they didn't really. Which is weird because you would think there are so many Vegas films that they could have referenced that they didn't. That's a weird one.
But no movie references. Okay, Jeff, we have an issue on that. Anyway.
Back in his doghouse.
Yes. Anyway, and in addition to all this, you'll find links to other resources such as
the Facebook page, Instagram, and Twitter, as well as the officially unofficial Steele Watchers Facebook fan group, which we don't own, but we are members of. So if you want to be cool and hang out with us, I've never said that before, and I never will say that again. But come and join us anyway. I've never been cool. Come and join us.
Or if you just want to join and hang out with everybody else that's cool and put up with us.
Yeah, exactly. We're there too. But yeah, come and join us and have fun with that. And yeah, that's where we are. So.
And also from the website, you can find ways that you can support the show financially.
Oh yes,
which
I meant to say that.
entitles you to watch our live stream where we make all of our mistakes in person and live, and you can watch it happen in real time.
Yeah, and
Yes.
there are quite a few. So
Yes. Yeah, well, we got several people making the comments today, that's for sure. Mostly about our technical issues. Anyway.
we had some technical issues, yes.
Oh, yes, we did. So next episode, now you steal it, now you don't. That would
That's
be, yeah, that would be it.
Episode.
All right. Well, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, everybody. Eric and Sara here. Just a quick announcement to let you know that, yes, we do appreciate everyone who listens, participates, and supports the podcast in whatever way you do. But we wanted to give an extra thank you to those who are so graciously giving to be monthly financial supporters.
We are making live streams of our recording sessions available to anyone who is a monthly financial supporter. So not only can you watch us live as we record our podcast episodes, you will be getting access to the raw, behind-the-scenes, unedited version of episodes before they get officially released.
And Sara, does that include our mistakes and screw-ups and our humiliating?
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Every
it does.
single one of them.
Every single one of them, yes. So again, this is just an extra thank you to those who are going above and beyond. But whether you choose to become a monthly financial supporter or not, we still love you. We want to say we thank you for your support, your encouragement, and your feedback.
If you want to become a monthly financial supporter, please visit our website at www.SteeleWatching.com to sign up.